Chapter 112. Swoosh. In just a short moment, all the imperial guards had left. Only 5 eunuchs were left in the hall. At this point, the difference in strength between the two sides had been reversed. Mi Kongquan was trembling with rage. His slender eyes glared at Qiu Jianhan like a venomous snake, filled with viciousness. Qiu Jianhan waved his sleeves and said faintly, "This old man can't be bothered to get involved in martial world grudges and personal matters like yours. I'm warning all of you, don't stir up trouble in the imperial city or else this old man will not let you off easily. Let's go. Mi Kongquan, I'll settle our scores with you after you've settled these trivial matters. I won't take advantage of you today as well. You're on your own now." The old marshal turned around angrily and strode away without giving anyone a chance to speak. Yunyang and the others were in awe as they watched from the side. Old Marshal Qiu was an expert. The older the ginger, the spicier it was indeed. His roguish methods were truly impressive. Yunyang could not help but be impressed. Old Marshal Qiu Jianhan's roguish domineering method was a stroke of genius. Seeing that his nephew could not hold on any longer, he had intervened immediately before the situation worsened. Once he had struck, he had aimed for Mi Kongquan's vital points without holding back. With a few simple words he spoke of the nation's righteousness, giving Mi Kongquan a taste of his own medicine. He had suppressed Mi Kongquan's arrogance to the point that he could not even retaliate. As long as Mi Kongquan dared to argue, Qiu Jianhan would capture him directly and execute him on the spot would only be a matter of convenience. Even though Mi Kongquan was aware of the severity of the situation and dared not argue, old Marshal Qiu had chased the other party's men away with his official authority and righteousness, leaving the other party without an army. Pulling old Marshal Qiu, who was already at his limits, he had even said before he left, "The martial world is the martial world, this old man can't be bothered with it. This old man does not take advantage of others." He had left just like that. No, old Qiu seemed to have left a threat before he left. "I'll settle the score with you after you're done here. If you don't handle it well, this old man will really settle the score with you." Settle the score. Let's see how you deal with my nephew. My nephew is dealing with you. If you get hurt or die, it's your bad luck. But if my nephew does anything wrong, then we'll continue to settle the score. The thickness of their skin could not be described as being as thick as a city wall. At the very least, they had to be as thick as a city wall. This is what a troublemaker is. This is what an old hooligan is. This is the pinnacle of being unreasonable. This is the highest realm. To look up to a high mountain and be intimidated. I'm utterly impressed. Yunyang reflected on himself deeply. In terms of being shameless, being a pain in the neck, acting like a hooligan, and being unreasonable, there was a lot of room for improvement. There was a lot more that he needed to learn. Look at the old marshal. When his nephew was at a complete disadvantage, he only needed one move to turn the situation around. This kind of method was many times more brilliant than the twists and turns he had just thought of. Simple, brutal, and direct. In spite of this, the effect was immediate and penetrating. It was truly remarkable. Looking at the 5 eunuchs who were dumbfounded on the spot, the crowd almost burst out laughing. How could a few eunuchs who had been living in the palace all year round want to compete with a veteran hooligan like Qiu Jianhan, an old hooligan, an old troublemaker? It was not even on the same technical level. Everything else aside, both parties were separated by an important organ. Mi Kongquan narrowed his eyes, looking at the direction where Qiu Jianhan had left, and snorted coldly. The old marshal's parting words are very reasonable. It's just a trivial personal matter, there's no need to stir up such a commotion. It's getting late now, let's settle the score quickly. It's not a big deal after all, let's end it quickly. Yunyang strode out gracefully and began to smooth things over. Actually, I feel that this is a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding here and there. Keeper Mi isn't an outsider and young Master Qiu is a friend as well. Let's talk amicably and end this misunderstanding. How about that? Mi Kongquan's cold gaze swept over Yunyang, obviously not knowing who this fellow who had popped out of nowhere was. Who did he think he was to forcefully pretend to be a peacemaker at such a critical juncture? Did he have the authority to do so? It's alright if you all really don't want to talk. Yunyang changed his tone immediately when he saw that no one was responding. Every grievance has its perpetrator, every debt has its debtor. The martial world's matters shall be settled in the martial world. Let's settle this grudge using the martial world's methods here. Isn't that satisfying? Let's fight. Whoever has the bigger fist is the one with the bigger reason. Yunyang said, anyway, there are 4 noble families on one side and 5 eunuchs on the other. According to the numbers, 5 is still more than 4. Why don't I share one as well? This must be Eunuch Wu over there. We're old acquaintances, let's have a chat. I'll leave the rest to you all. What a shameless statement. Yun Yang had already sprung up and charged towards Eunuch Wu when everyone else was still in a daze after he finished speaking. This time I, Lord Jiu, will have a good look at what kind of material this guy's foundation is made of. On the other side, Chiu Yun-san readily agreed. What Boss Yun said is exactly what I want. Release Keeper Mi's men, we'll only entertain Keeper Mi alone today. All of you attack. Before his words echoed in the air, the 8 guards of the 4 noble families and the rest of the guards swarmed forward. They were all experienced in the martial world. When the Imperial Guards had gathered earlier, there was a huge disparity in their strengths. Naturally, they dared not make any reckless moves. However, the tables had turned now and old Marshal Chiu's implied killing intent before he left was obvious. Of course, it would be best if they could keep Keeper Mi here forever, especially when they had the upper hand in this battle where they had the advantage of numbers. It would be a great favor to them. How could Dong Qianling and the rest be left behind? We're here too. F***CK, you weren't the only one who was tricked this time. We've been implicated after this as well. We have to find Mi Kongquan for this as well. Yes, I have to ask him for compensation for my pockmarks. Me too. Shui Yuan is most likely his accomplice. You're right. They must be together. Watch out for my fist. On the other side, Eunuch Wu's expression changed when he saw Yun Yang's overbearing approach. Without another word he ran away. Yun Yang chased after the eunuch, throwing a large brick in his hand like a shooting star. It landed squarely on the back of Eunuch Wu's head with a loud thud, eliciting a low grunt from the other party. This was only the beginning. Yun Yang had somehow managed to grab 7 to 8 bricks in his hands and was hurling them at Eunuch Wu. Eunuch Wu struggled with all his might, and when he finally made it to the corner, he was already hit by 5 to 6 bricks. He was bleeding profusely and his face was swollen. Yun Yang was inexplicably pleased, thinking that this fellow dared not expose his ability in front of others indeed. However, he liked this the most. You're afraid to expose yourself? I'll kill you directly. Let's see if you choose to expose yourself or be beaten to death by me. Roaring loudly, Yun Yang chased after Eunuch Wu like he was flying. Turning the corner, he could not help being stunned. The entire path was empty, but Eunuch Wu was nowhere to be seen. He ran away. Yun Yang turned back immediately, not giving this fellow the chance to assassinate him. He could not defeat him now, it was already good enough that he could take advantage of the situation. This fellow will reveal his true cultivation base once he's out of sight, not giving me a chance to attack. Yun Yang thought as he walked, but shouldn't this fellow be on the same side as Mi Kongquan? Why doesn't he dare show his ability in front of him? He'd rather be beaten half to death and humiliated to the point where he's worse than a pig or a dog. Why is he unwilling to show his ability? This was a mystery that he could not solve. However, Yun Yang believed that he would be able to solve it very soon. This fellow had suffered 2 consecutive losses in his hands. It would be strange if he did not want to seek revenge. Based on the fact that he had come back for revenge the last time, it was not difficult to determine this person's vengeful nature. He believed that he would definitely come for another assassination later. As long as he came for him again, Yun Yang would be able to find out the truth. When Yun Yang turned back to take a look at the battle, he was shocked. There were 4 eunuchs left, including Mi Kongquan. 3 of them had been defeated, leaving only Mi Kongquan to put up a fight. Mi Kongquan's ability was extraordinary. Even when he was facing the 4 noble young masters, 8 guards and 30 to 40 other experts' attacks, he was still able to handle the situation with ease. His body was like a swimming dragon as he weaved through the crowd. Occasionally he would strike and there would definitely be someone retreating, spitting blood. This General Steward Mi was a top master who was rarely seen in this world. With his own strength, he was able to withstand the combined attack of 40 to 50 experts. Although the majority of the attackers were at the 4th or 5th peak, the 8 guards were all at the 6th peak and above. There were even 2 experts who had reached the 7th peak. With such a strong combined ability, he could not even take care of Mi Kongquan. From Yun Yang's observation, Mi Kongquan had not even given his all and was still holding back. He did not know if it was old Marshal Chiu's warning ringing in his ears or if he himself knew that a head-on fight would not prove anything. It could even give both parties a buffer to step down. If he were to accidentally kill these 4 popinjays, then even if he were to hide in the palace forever, he would never be able to escape from the 4 noble families' deadly pursuit. Yun Yang's gaze was sharp. He could see through this in just a blink of an eye. At the same time, he came to the final conclusion that they were powerless to kill Mi Kongquan tonight. Chapter 113. No matter how popinjays the four noble young masters were, they were still aware of the fact that they were powerless against the strong. Obviously they had realized this as well. Just as they were worried that they would not be able to back down, they retreated in unison upon hearing Yun Yang's voice, as if they had received a divine command. Mi Kongquan's chilling gaze fell upon Yun Yang once more, his anger rising again. It's that brat again. Just now, when they had the advantage in numbers, this brat suggested to solve the problem by ganging up on them. Now, seeing that so many people could not defeat him, he actually jumped out to be the peacemaker. For a moment, Keeper Mi could not help feeling that although this child was young, his shamelessness was no less than Qiu Jinhan's. What AF * king genius. In spite of it, Mi Kongquan wanted to put an end to this matter as well. Things might really get out of hand if they were to continue. Seeing that the other party had stopped, he jumped out of the circle as well. We're all people of status after all. Yun Yang walked to the center of the circle and said earnestly, "How can we fight and kill so savagely?" Mi Kongquan and the four young masters rolled their eyes at the same time. You just said that we're all martial artists and that we can settle our problems with a fight. The martial world is the martial world and so on. The words are still ringing in our ears, but we've all become people of status just because the situation isn't right. This guy could say anything with just a flip of his tongue. What's the problem? What's the misunderstanding? Can't we just talk it out face to face? There's no need to resort to violence. Yun Yang continued to mediate, "Young Master Qiu, it's better to squash enmity than to keep it alive. We've fought for so long, and our anger should have dissipated. Why don't we have a peaceful talk?" Qiu Yunsan thought to himself, "My anger hasn't dissipated, it's just that I can't beat him." Mi Kongquan thought to himself, "My anger hasn't subsided, but there's no benefit in continuing this fight. Keeper Mi?" Yun Yang looked at Mi Kongquan and said, "I've heard about the whole story as well. You've probably done something bad out of good intentions, causing young Master Qiu to be in trouble right away, and it's a little more serious, am I right?" He turned to Qiu Yunsan. "What about you, young Master Qiu? You're young and arrogant, aren't you? Since we've lost face, we have to get it back. That's understandable, don't you think?" Both sides nodded simultaneously. "How about this? I will propose a solution for both of you to consider." Yun Yang said, "What about you, young Master Qiu? First, send all the people you've invited back. I believe you don't have the intention to kidnap or threaten them. You're only joking with Keeper Mi. Compensate each of them with 100 silver taels as compensation for their fright. That's not a lot, is it? As for these 3 eunuchs, each of them will have to pay 1,000 taels of silver for their medical fees." Yun Yang replied, "Then young Master Qiu's problem will be solved." He turned to look at Mi Kongquan and said, "However, Steward Mi's handling of the matter was indeed a little inappropriate. How about this? Since young Master Qiu has agreed to bury the hatchet, Steward Mi shall symbolically take out some imperial luminary paste to settle this matter." Imperial luminary paste. Mi Kongquan's tone had changed as he stared at Yun Yang with wide eyes. "Are you trying to be a peacemaker? You are obviously trying to extort money from us." On the other side, Qiu Yunsan's eyes shone as he said, "Boss is right. As long as Steward Mi takes out 5 portions of imperial luminary paste, we will write off today's matter. Pretend that it never happened." Dong Tianling and the other 2 men's eyes shone as well. "Brother Qiu is right. We are friends with Keeper Mi. Why do we have to damage our friendship? As long as you give us 5 portions of imperial luminary paste, we will bury the hatchet and wipe it all away." Mi Kongquan laughed in exasperation. "What a good plan you have. This is absolutely impossible. The imperial luminary paste was one of Yutong's imperial secret medicines. Its effects were extremely potent. Back when Yutong was founded, His Majesty had obtained the carcass of a legendary mystical beast, the yin-yang snake, by chance. It was also because he had eaten the yin-yang snake's flesh that he had attained the unrivaled mystical skill. He had beheaded generals and seized flags, triumphed in every battle, building his influence step by step until he had founded the Empire of Yutong. The entire Empire of Yutong now was a country that had been built from nothing, built with bare fists. It was evident how potent the yin-yang snake was. In spite of this, the strongest part of the yin-yang snake was not its flesh but its inner core. This inner core was recognized by the entire Tianshan continent as the only remaining top-notch mystical beast, the yin-yang snake's inner core. Cultivators in this realm could not consume it to enhance their cultivation base. Even a grandmaster's top-notch expert would only explode and die if he consumed it. A treasure that could not be used was of little value no matter how precious it was. Initially, this super inner core had been reduced to a symbolic treasure for quite some time. However, by chance, Yutong's imperial family had accidentally discovered that this inner core that could not be consumed to enhance one's cultivation base could be brewed into wine. Furthermore, the wine that was brewed was extraordinary. The process of brewing the wine was simple. The inner core was placed in a bowl filled with wine for a day and a night. The wine in the bowl would then condense into a semi-solid paste. There was only the bottom of the bowl. However, after consuming the bottom of the bowl, one would be invincible. The man's ability would be outstanding. This was secondary. What was more important was that, if there was a powerful expert by his side to assist him, a gifted person could cultivate immediately after consuming the luminary paste. With the help of the expert beside him to inject mystical chi into him, it was possible for him to awaken another chakra on top of his innate foundation. This was what made the luminary paste truly extraordinary. Although it was only a possibility of awakening another chakra, this was the only way to break through the innate chakra in the entire Tianshan continent. In this world, only Yutong's palace had this incredible item. Now Yunyang wanted 5 portions at once. This was more than just asking for an exorbitant price. It was robbery, a blatant robbery. How could Mi Kongquan agree to such a condition? Absolutely impossible. Mi Kongquan vetoed. The luminary paste is the imperial palace's secret medicine, and His Majesty the Emperor controls it personally. You're not just making things difficult for me, you have no intention of reconciling at all. Otherwise, why would you make such an impossible request? Mi Kongquan was the minister of imperial household after all. Even when he was at a disadvantage, he had long had the intention of reconciling. However, he rejected the harsh conditions directly with a resolute attitude. You want to exchange for the luminary paste with a few thousand silver taels? Isn't it too cheap? You're the ones who kidnapped them. Even the greediest robber in this world would never make such a request. Chiu Yun-san chuckled darkly. Others might not be able to do it, but Keeper Mi must have a way. Even if Keeper Mi really doesn't have a solution, he has to think of a way to achieve it. There's no way around this. Mi Kongquan said, aren't the few of you thinking too highly of me? I'm the minister of imperial household, but I'm only a servant with a handicapped body. How can I have such a fantastic item like the luminary paste? If the few young masters insist on making things difficult for me, I'll gladly oblige. It's nothing more than a life and death struggle. If Yun Yang had not mentioned the luminary paste, Chiu Yun-san and the other 3 young masters might have been fooled by Mi Kongquan's words without knowing it. Now, however, all these concerns were gone. The only thing that filled the ears of the 4 young masters was the luminary paste. To these 4 fellows who were almost drained by wine and women, no treasure in this world could compare to the luminary paste's allure. With such an enticement in front of them, it would be worth it even if they had to gamble with their lives. Chun Wanfeng snorted and said, is Keeper Mi's declaration to fight with his life on the line? It's a pity that the 4 of us have never been afraid of this, nor are we easily intimidated. If Keeper Mi is determined to do so, we'll make a big scene here tonight. Xia Bingchuan chuckled darkly. That's right. Perhaps we can't keep Keeper Mi here with our combined strength, but none of Keeper Mi's clansmen can live. Right. Keeper Mi, even if you can escape with your life, I don't know how many % of your life is left. Is it 10% or 20%? So what if I manage to escape with my life? After this battle, we're all enemies of life and death. We, the 4 noble families, will hunt you down immediately. We won't rest until we're dead. Dong Qianling raised his head gracefully. I can say here and now that we'll find you before you've recovered from your injuries. You'll be sent to the underworld. The 4 of us are willing to swear to the heavens that we'll work together to make this claim. Chiu Yun-san said. Therefore, if Keeper Mi isn't willing to take out the luminary paste to express his sincerity, then there's nothing to talk about. Chun Wanfeng said, even if you don't fight with your life, we won't let you go. With an irresistible temptation before them, these 4 fellows spoke one after another, trying their best to put on a show. Every word they uttered hit the nail on the head, showcasing the domineering nature of the young masters of noble families. Mi Kongquan was extremely miserable, his anger growing. However, he felt more aggrieved than the other 2 as he said angrily, what you're asking for is the luminary paste. Was that something simple? That's the imperial family's top secret medicine. Although the yin-yang snake's inner core can be made into the luminary paste, it can only produce 10 portions of it every year. Any more and it won't be effective. If it's 1 or 2 portions, I'll think of something. Perhaps there's still room for negotiation, but you're asking for 5 portions? Isn't this asking for too much? We don't care. Dong Qianling was unreasonable. This is the only condition. If you agree to it, we'll shake hands and talk. If you don't, we'll fight to the death. Mi Kongquan's eyes were about to spit fire as he glared at Dong Qianling, not speaking for a long time. After a long time he suddenly turned around. Pa pa pa. The 3 eunuchs behind him were all killed in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a piece of flint. Their brains burst open and they died on the ground. Chapter 114. Mi Kongquan's gaze was as sharp as a blade as it swept across their faces. All of them felt as if their faces had been slashed by a steel saber. It was so sharp that it hurt. Nice. Qiu Yunsan was delighted as he waved his hand. Release them. Mi Kongquan snorted coldly and sprung up. He made a turn in the air and disappeared without a trace. He did not even have the patience to take another look at these people. If it wasn't for his unfinished business, he would have disregarded everything and attacked with all his strength. Even if he had to flee to the ends of the world, he would kill all 4 of these annoying fellows to vent the anger in his heart. Got it? The luminary paste is in my hands. Qiu Yunsan leaped high, beaming with delight. Dong Qianling and the other 2 were beaming with delight as well, immeasurably satisfied. I didn't expect this old thing to actually have the ability to obtain the Empire of Yutong's royalties exclusive item. It's true. If it weren't for Boss' reminder, we wouldn't have thought of this at all. It's all thanks to Boss. Boss is our lucky star. It's really great. I must marry a few more concubines when I go back. I used to worry that I'd be too frivolous and play myself to death. It's all right now. I don't have to worry anymore. What about the extra portion? Chen Wanfeng asked. Why is there an extra portion? Including Boss, isn't it better if each of us gets one? Dong Qianling glared at him. Idiot, what do you mean? Chen Wanfeng shook his head quickly. That's exactly what I meant. I'm only saying this to test you all, to see if you're sincere towards Boss. Tisk, the 3 of them scoffed. Anyone could see that Chen Wanfeng had other ideas just now, but of course, he would not expose them now. Yunyang snorted and said, It's a shame that you all still have some conscience. Keep it for yourselves. If I'm not mistaken, I wouldn't dare to eat the luminary paste even if he really sent it over this time. What? Dong Qianling asked, would he dare to poison it? Why doesn't he dare to poison it? Yunyang snorted, 99% of the reason I dare not kill all of you today is because I'm wary of old Marshal Qiu and the 4 noble families' follow-up tactics. However, if all of you were to die a few days later, it would be reasonable for the old man in the palace to say that he didn't know. Even if your family wants to vent their anger on me, my cultivation is still intact and there is life everywhere. What's more, as long as the 4 of you are confirmed to be dead, the other party will immediately disappear. The sky is high and the earth is high, but where will you find them? Yunyang looked at the 4 fellows in exasperation. Do you lot roam the martial world so carelessly? It's just a small profit, and you've completely obliterated your vigilance? The 4 of them were dumbfounded and looked at each other. No, it can't be? Chen Wanfeng opened his mouth like a catfish. He swore to the heavens just now. Heh. Yunyang waved his hand and turned to leave. I know all of you can't let go of your obsession with obtaining the luminary paste, but be careful no matter how you look forward to it. Maybe the luminary paste is the real thing, just that it's mixed with something else. What if someone dies after eating it? Listening to Yunyang's alarmist talk, the popinjays looked as if they had been struck by lightning. It couldn't be. They had gone through so much to get their hands on the legendary luminary paste for men, but there was actually something fishy about it? When they came back to their senses, Yunyang had already disappeared. Boss words must be reasonable. Dong Qianling said, when the luminary paste comes 3 days later, I won't eat it immediately. I'll keep it first. If you lot aren't afraid, you can eat it first. The other 3 were fuming. King Dong Qianling, are you asking us to test the poison for you? Yunyang had left quickly. Just as he exited the alley, he swiftly executed his movement skill and left. At this moment, Yunyang had a vague feeling that someone was waiting for him. Someone was waiting for him. No, it should be said that the person had never left but had been eyeing him. Since you haven't left and have a vengeful heart, this young master will not let go of this opportunity tonight. I can play with you to my heart's content. As expected, as he walked out and headed in the direction of the residence of Yun, the feeling of being followed became clearer and clearer along the way. It also became more and more familiar. Yunyang continuously cultivated the fog of cloud conjuration as he walked. When he passed by a corner, he waved his hands casually and a few white silhouettes left his side without a sound, swiftly blending into the darkness of the night. One of the white silhouettes sprinted towards the residence of Yun like an arrow. Yunyang was halfway there. Just as he was about to turn the next corner, he suddenly stopped and scratched his head, muttering in annoyance, "What kind of memory is this? I've forgotten again." He turned around and walked back. It seemed like he was going back to get something. Those who were watching him in the dark cursed out loud. F***ck, this bastard was about to reach the perfect ambush spot that he had set up. Why did he turn back? He was walking rather fast too. Fine, your father will chase after him and kill him. With a swoosh, he flew up to the roof soundlessly and covered 100 feet. After a few leaps, he felt that he was already in front of Yunyang and stretched his head to look. Yunyang, who was walking over, suddenly slapped his head and heaved a long sigh. I'm really stupid. Do I have to go back tonight to get it? It won't delay me even if I go tomorrow. The road is not close. Standing on the road, he pondered for a while, scratching his ears and cheeks. Finally he turned back. I'd better go home first, wash up and sleep. Then he took large strides forward. The person in the dark was so angry that his lungs were about to explode when he saw this. F***ck, how could this bastard achieve anything with such an indecisive attitude? However, no matter how easy the target was, he had no choice but to sneak back. Yunyang came near the corner again. When he was about 100 feet away, he suddenly stopped and looked to the side. Hey, why is there a kitten here? I can bring it back to keep the few at home company. The person in the dark was infuriated and piqued. Indeed, there was a small, white thing at the corner of the wall. This young Master Yunyang had actually gone to catch the kitten. The kitten seemed to be a little difficult to catch. Yunyang had gone around it a few times but could not even catch a strand of its fur. In the end, he had to use mystical chi to restrain the kitten. As he held it in his arms, he was actually comforting it with a gentle voice. It was a very pretentious act. Little fellow, how obedient would you have been if you had done this earlier? Isn't that right? Isn't it more comfortable to be hugged by me than on the cold ground? You're such an ignorant little fellow. I'm doing a good deed by bringing you back today. Kitty, you don't know, but I saw a few eunuchs tonight and they were so disgusting. The smell on your body. The person in the dark was so furious that he fell back. He really wanted to rush forward and ask Yunyang, Yunyang, are you sick? Are you? That was more than enough. However, Yunyang had to walk over eventually. He walked slowly with his head lowered, one hand caressing the little white kitten in his arms lovingly as he murmured, Kitten, shall I give you a name? You'll follow me from now on. Big White? You don't like it? Xiaobai? Xiao Xiaobai? 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 Whitetail. F***ck, none of these are okay, you don't like them? Why don't I give you a name? I've seen this person tonight. How about you call me Old Wu the eunuch? Kitten, you're a female almost the same as Old Wu. Actually, you're more complete than him. With a clatter, the person in the dark gritted his teeth, almost breaking his molars. He could not hold it in anymore. Although Yunyang was still 30 to 40 feet away from the corner where the ambush was set up, the person in the dark did not want to wait any longer. The murderous intent in him was boiling like never before and could no longer be suppressed. If he did not kill this man, he would not be human. With a swoosh, the person leaped down from the high wall at the corner like a bolt of lightning. His high-speed movements left a trail of afterimages in the air as a gleaming saber light flashed like a bolt of lightning in the cloudy sky. The chilling murderous intent caused the wind in the night sky to stop flowing temporarily. Yunyang, who was faced with the sudden killing intent, seemed to be taken aback as he tossed the kitten in his arms away. Oh my God, there's an assassin. Then he moved swiftly, obviously intending to evade the killing intent before him. Although Yunyang's response was not exactly brilliant, it was still acceptable. He might have been able to evade an ordinary assassin, but the person in the dark had planned for such a long time to kill him. How could he evade it so easily? Swoosh. The saber light glinted as it pierced through Yunyang's right shoulder. That's right, it pierced through without any hindrance. However, the assassin who had succeeded in his attack was stunned. What was going on? It was a vital point, but why was there no force behind it? How could this be? What was going on? The answer was revealed right away. Yunyang, who was perfectly fine, had already appeared on the other side. The only difference was that there was a saber in his hand. As soon as the saber appeared, its sharpness was unparalleled, causing the moonlight in the sky to lose its luster. Although the assassin was still baffled by what had just happened, he did not hesitate at all. His body flashed like a phantom and he was already in front of Yunyang. He swung his saber straight down, but there was no sound of wind being sliced through. The speed of this slash seemed to be faster than the previous one. With a flick of Yunyang's wrist, the saber light filled the night sky like a peacock spreading its tail. Chapter 115. The chilling saber light appeared for the first time, like the stars in the sky blinking coldly as they fell from all directions. The assassin exclaimed in surprise at the sight of such a strange move. As a high-level martial artist, his instincts told him that the other party's saber had actually covered all of his openings. If he had not retracted his saber, he might have been able to injure Yun-Yang severely, but his opponent's saber could definitely kill him. What kind of saber skill was this? How could there be such a dazzling and incisive saber skill in this world? My cultivation base is at least 3 levels higher than this fellow's. Logically speaking, even if I stood still, he might not be able to hurt me. Why does it make me feel like my life is being threatened now? He took a step back almost instinctively, the saber in his hand turning outwards to defend himself. He could only feel a gust of chilly wind flashing past him. With a crack, his saber snapped in half without any sign of resistance. The chilly wind blew against his face. Shocked, he took 3 steps back like a phantom, narrowly avoiding the saber that was aimed at his life. He could no longer maintain his illusory form, allowing Yun-Yang to see his true form for the first time. Yun-Yang chuckled, "It really is you?" The assassin was Eunuch Wu. He had not even changed out of his eunuch robe. Eunuch Wu, who was 50 feet away, was like a wandering spirit in the night. His eyes under his brows were flickering like the wisp as he stared at Yun-Yang eerily and suddenly asked, "What is this skill?" "What saber skill? What saber?" Yun-Yang said lightly, "This is called destiny. Destiny's movement, Destiny's saber truth, Destiny's saber truth, Destiny's saber. In other words, this saber is in my hands. Avoiding your assassination and then killing you, it's all destiny." What Yun-Yang had said was the absolute truth, but with his tone of voice, it was filled with a different kind of meaning. Eunuch Wu's grayish-white brows arched as he said faintly, "I see." Suddenly, his body floated up again like a ghost. In an instant, his body turned into countless phantoms. One by one, the phantoms appeared and then disappeared in the air. It was hard to tell what was real and what was real. "I want to see whether your so-called heavens will favor me or you in the end." He casually tossed the remaining half of the broken saber onto the ground. He had used this saber for countless years and had accompanied him through life and death thousands of times, throwing it away like a pair of worn-out shoes. To a first-rate assassin like Eunuch Wu, things that could not be used were just trash. Why would he care about throwing them away? Chi-chi-chi, a series of explosions rang out in the air. Eunuch Wu's hands turned into eagle claws and attacked Yun-Yang without a trace. Yun-Yang did not even spare it a glance. It was still the same style, merciless blade. Eunuch Wu retracted his hand and retreated as fast as lightning. He shook his head and said, "Still not enough." After thinking for a moment, Xiao Chen's body suddenly turned into flowing water as he flew over. His palms landed lightly, but they carried a tremendous force. Yun-Yang did the same, executing merciless blade again. Although it was already his 3rd time using it, Yun-Yang felt that he had gained a deeper understanding of this saber style each time he used it. Especially when he was facing the immense pressure of a mortal enemy, the realization was especially profound. This time, there was an additional ray of starlight amidst the saber light that resembled the stars. Chi-chi. Eunuch Wu was forced to retreat once again. Looking at the front of his shirt that had been torn by the saber's blade, he could not help but feel a chill in his heart. How could this be? He had been through hundreds of battles and his cultivation base had reached the pinnacle of his life, reaching the pinnacle of the 7th-level mystical chi. Yet, this child from the Yun family before him was only at the 3rd or 4th-level mystical chi. The gap between their cultivation base was like heaven and earth. Yet, the other party had a saber in his hand and was able to hold him off with a single move. There was even a risk of him getting hurt if he forced his way in. It was inconceivable. Yun-Yang sucked in a deep breath. The 3 consecutive slashes just now were marvelous and flawless, but his mystical chi was on the brink of exhaustion due to the exertion. Luckily, Emi was there to provide continuous support, but this situation could not last long. Emi's support had its limits as well. Yun-Yang estimated that he would be completely drained after 2 more slashes. Yun-Yang could not help but feel a strong sense of helplessness. He could clearly feel that if he had enough power, even if he had a 6th heaven beginner cultivation base, a single merciless blade would definitely be able to slice this powerful enemy in half in an instant. There was an endless murderous intent and a sure kill move, but such a godly skill could only protect himself when facing an enemy 3 levels higher than him. As he pondered, Eunuch Wu suddenly sneered and said faintly, "Young Master Yun, prepare to die." He leaped into the air and floated 20.5 feet in midair, his palm striking down. Air-rending palm. There was still a distance of 20 feet between them, but Yun Yang could already feel a strong, forceful force coming at him. Raising his saber to block the attack, Yun Yang was forced to take 5 steps back with a loud boom. His chest felt like it had been struck by lightning, his face pale. Eunuch Wu saw that a close-range attack was not going to work, so he resorted to a long-range mystical chi attack that consumed the most cultivation base. This was also the attack that Yun Yang could not defend against at the moment. No matter how sharp your saber is, no matter how strong your saber skill is, when faced with such an overwhelming force, Eunuch Wu cackled, "What use is your endless techniques? Tonight, this old man will teach you a lesson before you die." Yun Yang suppressed the churning qi and blood in his chest and said with a faint smile, "You're only a crippled eunuch. What right do you have to call yourself an old man? Do you know what a husband means? Do you have the right to be a husband? Do you have the capital?" The viciousness of the words was no doubt worse than a million curses to Eunuch Wu. His ruddy face instantly turned ghastly pale. Then it turned ashen. His entire being fell silent, the murderous intent in his eyes overflowing. His rage had reached its peak, but he did not say a word. He took 3 steps in the air, and with these 3 steps, 3 powerful gusts of wind from his palms came hurtling towards Yun Yang. Yun Yang was like a withered leaf in the wind, retreating lightly. In an instant he flew 150 feet away with the wind. In spite of this, the other party's mystical chi did not diminish. Separated by hundreds of feet, there were still ripples that struck the divine edge. Barf! Yun Yang threw his head back and spat out a mouthful of blood. He staggered, almost losing his footing. Eunuch Wu cackled, his laughter laced with endless resentment. He chased after Yun Yang like a shadow. "Young Master Yun, let this crippled eunuch send you on your way. Although I'm crippled, I'm still alive in this world. Young Master Yun, you who have all 5 parts of your body, can only go to the netherworld. Have a safe journey." He raised his palm like a saber and slammed it down ferociously. Boom! A loud explosion resounded. Eunuch Wu's scrawny body flew 30 feet away like a kite with a broken string. In front of Yun Yang, there was a muscular silhouette that stood tall like a towering mountain. The newcomer was dressed in black, his gaze fixed on Eunuch Wu like lightning. A disdainful smirk hung at the corners of his lips. "A eunuch actually wants to send my young master on his way? You've overestimated yourself." It was Fang Mafe. Behind him was Whitey III, who was panting heavily. Eunuch Wu was shocked. The person before him was full of vigor. The force of his palm strike earlier was like a tsunami. His cultivation base was definitely not lower than his own. "Who are you?" "My surname is Mei." A cold voice replied faintly, "I'll send you on your way. What's the point of living when your body is crippled? The sooner you die, the sooner you can reincarnate." Eunuch Wu spun around like a whirlwind and struck with his palm. With a bang, one of the people behind him took 3 steps back. His body rolled like a flood dragon that was rolling in the clouds. His palm was like a sharp horn that suddenly pierced through the air. "Single-horned flood dragon, Mei Wenjian." Eunuch Wu roared, punching and kicking. "Residents of Yun's butler, it's actually you." Lao Mei snorted. "So what if it's your old man?" Without dodging at all, the 2 of them rolled around and fought each other. Fang Mafei's muscular form soared into the air. His palms were like mountain-splitting axes, striking continuously. 2 experts had joined forces to attack Eunuch Wu. Eunuch Wu had already expended a lot of energy in his battle with Yin Yang earlier. Even if he were to face Fang Mafei alone, he would not be able to do so. What was more, there was still Lao Mei, who was not much weaker than Fang Mafei. With an angry roar, he punched Lao Mei and kicked Fang Mafei. His body spun like a whirlwind as he flew into the air. Both of his hands struck out continuously. It was as if he had transformed into a 1,000-armed devil. Eunuch Wu spat a mouthful of blood, but he managed to break free from the 2 men's encirclement. He said hoarsely, "I shall seek revenge for today." Meow. With a cat's meow, a white silhouette appeared out of thin air like a bolt of lightning, 2 sharp front claws swiping down. A mere lightning, Eunuch Wu snorted coldly and punched. However, the cat that had pounced over suddenly let out a shrill cry, "Meow." He shook his head and swung his tail. With a howl, the fist-sized cat head suddenly grew to the size of a wash basin. When he opened his mouth was even bigger than his head. His white fangs flashed with a steel-like sharpness. He met Eunuch Wu's right fist head-on and bit down ferociously. Eclipse Panther. Eunuch Wu was scared out of his wits in that instant. He desperately tried to retract his fist. Even though he reacted quickly, he was still bitten. His fist was drenched in blood and the pain penetrated deep into his bones. This unforeseen event happened right in front of them, and it was extremely sudden. With a meow, it was an eclipse panther that had pounced over. Eunuch Wu felt his mind go blank. Chapter 116. Seeing that the path ahead was blocked, Eunuch Wu retreated quickly in an attempt to find another way to escape. In spite of that, the leopard in the air did not stop its attack after injuring its enemy. It opened its mouth again and a ray of green light shot out from its throat. Swoosh! Eunuch Wu could no longer evade the ambush as his chest exploded with a pop. The green light then turned into a storm of sharp blades that blossomed in all directions. Ah! Eunuch Wu howled. Almost his entire chest had been torn apart by the wind blades. Blood dripped everywhere as white bone stubs were exposed. The little fellow in the air swayed before it fell with a shake of its head. It was a cub after all, so it could only strike once. Fang Mafei had traversed hundreds of feet like a bolt of lightning, his body as heavy as a mountain. With a shout, 19 consecutive punches fell like 19 heavy hammers. Behind him, Lao Mei appeared like a phantom. The sword in his hand glinted coldly as it turned into 3 rays of light, aiming for Eunuch Wu's back. In an instant, Eunuch Wu, who had been severely injured, was attacked from the front and back at the same time. His life was at stake. Eunuch Wu was naturally unwilling to resign himself to his fate. With a shrill howl, his body spun and his legs danced like a whirlwind. In an instant he kicked Mafei's fists a dozen times. His right hand shook and a knife appeared in his hand as if it had materialized out of thin air. Clang 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 clang. He exchanged 3 blows with Lao Mei. Fang Mafei's strength, Lao Mei's strength, and Eunuch Wu's own recoil force mixed together to form a gravitational whirlpool. Yun Yang, who wanted to finish off the attack, could no longer do so. If he intervened now, it would be equivalent to attacking 3 people at the same time. Not only would his own attack be weakened, he would also have to bear the recoil of the 3 people's combined strength. The loss outweighed the gain. It was better to stay put than to move. He had to observe the situation and find a good opportunity to strike. The 3 people in the whirlpool roared in unison and attacked in a frenzy. This vortex was formed from the combined power of the 3 of them. If any one of them died, their power would collapse and the vortex would disappear. To Mei and Fang, killing Eunuch Wu as soon as possible was naturally the best method. Naturally, they gave it their all and attacked madly. The pressure Eunuch Wu endured immediately skyrocketed. He was also a decisive person. A perfectly round arrow of blood suddenly sprayed out of his mouth. His face immediately became deathly pale. However, his body rushed into the sky like a sharp sword. Surprisingly, he had used a self-damaging method to forcefully combine the 3 forces into an upward force. Although he had to bear the most direct impact, his entire body flew more than 200 feet in an instant, escaping the range of the vortex where the 3 forces converged. Mei and Fang, on the other hand, were temporarily trapped in the vortex and could not escape immediately. At this moment, Eunuch Wu finally felt relieved. As long as he changed his direction in midair, he would be able to escape unscathed. Who would have thought that he would be reduced to such a state just to take revenge on a youth who had humiliated him? He had to be careful in the future. Perhaps, now that the 2 experts were trapped in the vortex, there was still a sliver of space left. Should he try to ambush Yun Yang and end this trouble once and for all? Just as Eunuch Wu was hesitating, a small white silhouette suddenly appeared in front of him. Another snow-white kitten the size of a palm appeared in front of him. Meow? Eunuch Wu was shocked at first, but then he recalled that the eclipse panther had already exhausted its energy and was powerless. It was already a great fortune to have one eclipse panther, a 9th-level mystical beast. Who could be so amazing as to have 2 at the same time? It was impossible. Childish. Eunuch Wu snorted coldly. Do you think you can fool this old man? He punched out fiercely. He was confident that this punch of his could turn the lightning cat in front of him into minced meat. However, there were some things that one would not believe until it happened. Meow? The kitten in front of him meowed loudly. Suddenly, with a shake of its head, a huge panther head appeared, its fangs glaring as it bit down viciously. Arg? Eunuch Wu was scared out of his wits. Was it really an eclipse panther? Arg. With a loud crack, Eunuch Wu, who was severely injured and could not react in time, was no longer as lucky as before. His right hand was bitten off with a loud crack. However, the little leopard also let out a miserable howl, and its body was sent flying like a ball. In its mouth was Eunuch Wu's complete right hand. Although Eunuch Wu was heavily injured, he still had some strength left in him. The force of the punch had still managed to push the little panther back. Eunuch Wu, who had lost an arm, howled into the sky as he staggered backward in the air, falling straight down. On the other side, Yun-yang had already sprung up to catch the falling panther in his arms. He tossed Eunuch Wu's right hand away in disdain and hugged the little panther in his arms, his heart aching. The little panther meowed and fell unconscious in Yun-yang's arms. Eunuch Wu was still descending when another white shadow flashed in front of him. Another junior leopard appeared in front of him, its eyes full of anger. "This old bastard, how dare you hurt my two brothers? Go to hell." The little panther shook its head and tail as it growled. It opened its mouth and a green glow appeared. As expected, a ball of wind blades flew out. "There's actually another one?" Eunuch Wu was filled with despair. "Had I fallen into an eclipse panther's nest tonight? Why are there so many of these things?" However, the ball of wind blades was already in front of him. Eunuch Wu could not dodge or counterattack in time. He closed his eyes and roared, activating all of his mystical chi, potential and life force. Poof, 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 his neck, chest, shoulders and face were all drenched in blood. His face was almost stripped of flesh while one of his eyes was struck by a wind blade with a howl. A puddle of black water splattered. One of his eyeballs had been blown out. Eunuch Wu cried out in agony as he fell. Suddenly, with a long howl, his entire body burst forth with a bright brilliance. His entire body was enveloped in a layer of green light. He was like a meteor in the sky, dragging a long tail behind him as he rushed out at an extremely fast speed. Meteorite soul ignition. Fang Mafei, who had just escaped the whirlpool of energy, could not catch up. Eunuch Wu's current speed had far exceeded the limits of a human speed and was still accelerating. It was difficult to catch up. Young master, dodge. That's the astral soul fusion arcane art. Fang Mafei knew that it was impossible, but he still chased after the eunuch with all his might. At the same time he shouted a warning, his face drenched in sweat. Astral soul fusion arcane art. This was the ultimate method of turning a person's life force into a shooting star in the sky for the final blow. With such extreme speed it could even kill someone 3 levels higher. It was indestructible. There was almost no speed that could match the speed of this technique. After this technique, the bearer would have to pay the price of having his blood and life force depleted, his meridians ruptured. Even if God of Zenith wanted to save him, it would be futile. However, there had never been a case of failure when this move was used to recoup his losses. Fang Mafei had never thought that this eunuch who had always been in the palace would possess such an arcane skill. What was more, he had suddenly executed it and turned the tables around. In the blink of an eye, Eunuch Wu was already in front of Yun-yang. He did not slow down at all as he charged straight at Yun-yang. Even if it was a city wall, he would have made a huge hole in it. However, at this critical moment, Yun-yang, who was right in front of him, suddenly disappeared. He had disappeared. He had completely disappeared. What replaced him was a thick cloud of fog. Eunuch Wu's charging figure passed through the cloud of fog without any obstruction. The only damage he had done was to puncture a huge hole in the cloud of fog and take away a large portion of it. That was all. Eunuch Wu's body suddenly stopped after traveling another 100 feet or so. He seemed to have thought of something and fell into a state of shock that he had never experienced before. Like a puppet, he slowly turned around and stared at the cloud mist that had yet to dissipate. There was still a big hole in it. His only remaining eye revealed a look of disbelief. Lao Mei and Fang Mafei had arrived as well. The two of them stared blankly at the cloud with their 4 eyes, only feeling that their minds were in a mess. The cloud of fog thickened and Yun-yang's silhouette gradually reappeared. The cloud of fog that Eunuch Wu had taken away returned to them in wisps as Yun-yang's silhouette gradually became clearer. When the cloud of fog had completely disappeared, Yun-yang stood on the ground weakly in his purple robe. His face was pale and his eyes were lifeless. The 3 of them could clearly hear the sound of his panting. However, he was still standing, still alive. Even though he looked dispirited, he was still standing. Eunuch Wu's single eye was filled with disbelief, astonishment, shock, and a hint of genuine fear. Eunuch Wu stammered, "Supreme Cloud?" Slowly Yun-yang straightened himself. His straight back was like a sharp sword that soared into the sky, its sharpness shining brightly. His gaze became weary but dignified as he said faintly, "That's right, I'm Supreme Cloud." Cough cough. Ha. Eunuch Wu choked and coughed as blood gushed out of his mouth. His blood contained countless pieces of internal organs, but he kept laughing. A miserable smile, a self-mocking smile. His voice was weak and his life force was like a candle in the wind. I didn't expect to die in the hands of the legendary Lord Supreme Cloud today. is truly a blessing of 3 lifetimes. This life has not been in vain. Eunuch Wu's eyes were dim. I've worked so hard, but in the end it's all for naught. The light in his eyes dimmed rapidly as his voice grew weaker. Yunyang took a step forward, his voice steady. Eunuch Wu, tell me who you are. Eunuch Wu shook his head slowly and murmured, is there still meaning to it? What month and what day are you? Yunyang asked. Chapter 117. Before he could finish his sentence, Eunuch Wu's body swayed and fell forward. First he knelt on the ground. His calves and knees were crushed at the same time. Then his whole body fell forward and lay on the ground. His head rolled out of his body. His life force and potential had been completely exhausted. Even his deific consciousness and soul had gone through the meteor soul ignition. His body was like a cracked ceramic that would shatter at the slightest touch. Yunyang sucked in a deep breath. Autumn had come. It was the mid-autumn festival of the 8th month. It was time for a reunion. It was obvious. Eunuch Wu's identity was the 15th of the 8th month. From spring to autumn? Yunyang mumbled to himself, feeling more and more that the matter was a mystery to him. This man from the Hall of Autumn had died in his hands so inexplicably. The cause of it was a foolhardy test. It was an unexpected test for both parties. In spite of this, both Yunyang and Eunuch Wu had not truly realized that the other was their true enemy. Yet, the victor of life and death had been decided just like that. Yunyang turned around. He met Lao Mei and Fang Mafei's gazes that were filled with shock but also admiration and respect. Your Lord Supreme Cloud? Lao Mei stammered. Fang Mafei looked at Yunyang with a burning gaze. Lord Supreme Cloud? Yunyang sighed softly, countless memories seemed to flash through his eyes. Finally he said in a lonesome voice, I am now, your young master Yun. Yes, young master. At this moment, Fang Mafei and Lao Mei's bodies were ramrod straight. Both of their eyes were shining with a fiery radiance. They had never thought that the person they had been serving was the Empire's guardian that the entire nation's people had gone crazy for and worshipped. Such a heroic figure was actually their young master. At this moment they felt their blood rush to their throats. For a moment they did not know what to say. It was as if an electric current had passed through their bodies. Supreme Cloud. Heavenly Cloud. Fang Mafei and Lao Mei felt their eyes moisten at the same time. That was because he was excited, because he felt honored. After the grievous news of the 9 Supremes being attacked, the entire empire of Yutong seemed to be shrouded in a gloomy cloud. Everyone's mood was unprecedentedly heavy, so oppressed that they wanted to fight with their lives on the line. However, the moment he heard the name Supreme Cloud, that feeling vanished without a trace. It was as if the dark clouds that filled the sky had disappeared without a trace the moment these 2 words appeared. Realization dawned on both of them, especially Lao Mei. Why did Yunyang often disappear and reappear suddenly? Why were there no maids or servants in the mansion? Why was her young master always so mysterious? Now, there was an answer to all of this. The young master was Supreme Cloud. That night, the empire of Yutong's capital city was indeed turbulent. The 4 great young masters were going up against the imperial palace chief. More than half of the forces in the capital were paying close attention to the subsequent development of the situation. Although Mi Kongquan had personally confirmed that he had reconciled with the 4 fellows and that it was just a misunderstanding, none of the 4 eunuchs he brought out had returned. This was intriguing. For the imperial palace, this was not a small matter. No matter how Mi Kongquan was the imperial palace chief, no matter how powerful he was, he had to give an explanation. As far as this matter was concerned, the 4 young masters were unscrupulous in their actions. This was pardonable and even understandable. In spite of this, Mi Kongquan had done it without any qualms, even mobilizing a large number of imperial guards. This was something to ponder. Early the next morning, the various forces who had been anticipating the subsequent developments were surprised to find that no one had mentioned the matter anymore. It was as if the huge incident last night was just a gentle breeze that passed without a trace. Qiu Jianhan was too lazy to say anything. At the same time he was waiting for Keeper Mi's follow-up, observing the changes quietly. As for the others, not even the imperial censors who usually stirred up trouble had jumped out to accuse them. Even Qiu Jianhan felt that this matter was rather odd. Subconsciously, he exchanged a glance with Lung Daoyin, only to see that the latter's eyes were filled with confusion as well. Qiu Jianhan frowned at once. If he were to say that he had overlooked something while being part of the plot, Lung Daoyin, who was not part of it, would not have noticed it either. This matter was getting more and more out of hand. Yunyang went into cultivation mode immediately when he returned to his residence. The battle tonight had been full of twists and turns, far beyond Yun Yang's expectations. Most importantly, his intention had never been to kill. He wanted to find out more about the mastermind behind this eunuch Wu. However, his initial intention had obviously fallen through. In spite of this, there was another unexpected gain in today's battle other than martial arts and destiny saber art. Eunuch Wu was actually from the Hall of Autumn. He had been dealing with the Hall of Spring all this while, but he could not get out of this circle. Now, someone from the Hall of Autumn had popped out of nowhere? It was a strange matter indeed. I believe that Mi Kongquan is from the Hall of Spring. Although this eunuch Wu is acquainted with him, he might not know the other's true identity. At least, Mi Kongquan doesn't know eunuch Wu's background. This eunuch Wu has never shown his true combat power in front of Mi Kongquan. I've used all my forces in today's battle, including the 3 Eclipse Panthers and myself. In the end, I could only kill eunuch Wu with a Pyrrhic victory. It's truly remarkable, and this is only the 15th of the 8th month of the Hall of Autumn. Yun Yang felt the terror from the bottom of his heart. Although he had won the battle in the end, he had also paid a hefty price for using the Fog of Cloud conjuration to counter eunuch Wu's desperate attack. In addition, the 2 junior leopards needed to be healed. Yun Yang went into closed-door cultivation immediately, channeling the air of vitality to heal them. Fang Mafei and Lao Mei found a secluded spot to meditate in the yard. Occasionally they would open their eyes, feeling their blood boiling. Supreme Cloud. The young master was actually Supreme Cloud. This piece of news was still like a thunderclap, rumbling in the minds of the 2 people. Yun Yang did not say anything more, but both of them chose to keep their mouths shut. What was Supreme Cloud's identity? Was there even a need to ask? This secret was enough to shake the entire continent. Once it was leaked, the consequences would be dire. What I yearn to see the most is the moment young master soars into the sky with the power of a hidden dragon. Fang Mafei and Lao Mei had the same thought. Just the thought of that moment made them tremble with excitement. However, the young master was Supreme Cloud. Then the young master's enemy would be the entire continent. All the strong cultivators of the continent. No wonder young master always said that he was not capable enough, that he despised his slow progress. So this was the truth. Following young master, we need to improve our capabilities. This was a must. Therefore, both of them had entered a state of desperation that they had never experienced before in their cultivation. When he woke up the next day, Yun Yang felt his body relax, his injuries fully healed. As for the 2 Eclipse Panthers, the one with the heaviest injuries had mostly recovered while the other was completely healed. Not slow. Yun Yang opened the message sent by the 9 Heavens dictum. No ripples at all? Yun Yang's brows slowly furrowed as he looked at the information he had gathered from all over the place. This did not seem to be normal. So many major incidents had happened in these few days. From the incident with Shui Yuehan and the others to Fu Guansan, all the way until now with Mi Kongquan's incident. The accumulation of these incidents had not stirred up any ripples at all. Logically speaking, if it was just the imperial court, the residents of imperial justice, the board of justice, a few princes and even the civil, military and political parties in the imperial court, when the censors were at their fiercest, they should be attacking each other. You attack while I defend. It was a back-and-forth tussle. Slowly digging forward amidst such disputes was the right thing to do. However, now, such a major incident had not stirred up any ripples at all. What did this mean? It meant that all these incidents that should have happened had been suppressed by a large hand. Suppressed forcefully. However, who in the capital city had such power? Yun Yang sucked in a deep breath. No matter what, the Seer's House's incident could finally come to an end. As long as these 4 popinjays were still in Tiantang, the 4 Seasons Tower would not dare to act recklessly, at least for the time being. After all, 5 people had been killed in the Seer's House's incident. Just the follow-up countermeasures alone would take them some time to think. Finally, I can relax. Just as Yun Yang was thinking about this, tens of thousands of miles away, on a cliff shrouded in clouds and mist, a man dressed in gray sat there quietly. 5 to 6 thick iron chains hung on his body, dark red in color. In the middle of them were strips of dark red mystical beast tendons. 2 chains passed through his shoulders and shoulder blades. The 3rd chain passed through his chest and wrapped around his spine. Then, it extended out into a bottomless cave. Even so, it was not enough. There was a similar chain on each of his legs. One could only imagine the torment this man had endured. Right now, he was sitting in front of the stone table with a tranquil expression, slowly making tea and drinking tea. Facing the dense and impenetrable sea of clouds, he still had a calm expression on his face. Chapter 118. Like an immortal descending from the heavens, he descended calmly, his sleeves fluttering in the wind. He was indescribably otherworldly. However, his face was covered by a glittering golden mask. It gave one the appearance of extreme coldness and chilled one's heart. He flew over and landed on the cliff. His gaze flickered as he looked at the shackled man in gray with a gentle smile. "Brother Gu, it's been many years since we last met. I'm relieved that you're still as elegant as before." The man in gray said faintly, "If I remove these chains, I'll let you know that I'm even more elegant than before." The man in white laughed. His clothes were as white as snow, untainted by even a speck of dust. His voice was elegant. "Please forgive me, Brother Gu. I can't do such a foolish thing." The gray-clothed man laughed as well. "You're a complete bastard. Tell me what's the matter. Or perhaps you're just here to visit your prisoner." The man in white said, "It's still that matter. Brother Gu, you should understand why I'm here now." "I don't. Please explain." The man in white said, "The Great Heaven Lock Formation that day locked an area of 1,000 miles around Tianshan Cliff. It took me decades of treasures to completely imprison the 9 little fellows' shape-shifting abilities and capture them in one fell swoop. You told me that I can rest easy from now on. However, the situation may not be so optimistic now." The man in gray lifted his eyelids and said faintly, "Not optimistic? Didn't you promise me that day that you'll return my freedom after that? Did you do it?" "Brother Gu, you understand me." The man in white said sincerely, "You're extremely resourceful. How would I dare to let you go so recklessly? You should understand my choice." The man in gray smiled. "That's right, you wouldn't dare to let me go." There was a hint of pity in his eyes. "As for the 9 little fellows, I've actually told you long ago that everything is God's will. How can I believe in God's will?" The man in white stood on the edge of the cliff with his arms behind his back. His sleeves fluttered and rustled. The surrounding clouds gathered again but were completely dispersed by his breath. "Brother Gu, you said that year that when the 9 Supremes returned, the world would be turned upside down, and the martial world would be dominated by you." The man in white spoke word by word. "I asked you back then, would there be only one person left in the 9 Supremes? Tell me no." He suddenly turned his head and looked at the man in gray. "Now tell me again. Yes or no?" The gray-clothed man smiled and said, "This is a heavenly secret that cannot be revealed." A gentle smile appeared in the eyes of the man in white. "Brother Gu, you're forcing me?" The man in gray lowered his gaze and said lightly, "Everything is destined by the will of the heavens, and it is also the calamity of my life." The man in white kept quiet for a moment before saying, "Brother Gu, you only have to tell me the truth. Which Supreme is still alive among the 9 Supremes?" The man in gray's brows twitched as his gaze froze for a moment, but he still smiled faintly. "I can only tell you that you won't be able to find him. That's all." The white-robed man let out a long howl, and all the clouds and fog within a circular area of 1,000 lis rose into the air with a bang. The clouds and fog in such a large area were all stirred up by his howl, and they rose thousands of feet into the air. The entire field of vision instantly became clear. The surrounding mountains were lush and lush, forming a beautiful picture. So beautiful. The man in gray looked at the mountains that had suddenly revealed themselves in a daze and murmured, "This is the secular world." His eyes turned half a circle to look at the man in white by the cliff and said softly, "This is the secular world." The man in white let out a long howl, releasing all the frustrations in his chest and regaining his initial composure. He smiled faintly and said, "That's right. What I've encountered is the secular world, what you've encountered is also the secular world. However, our temperaments are different and so are our states of mind." The man in gray smiled faintly. "That's right. The tea has already cooled before the person has left." The man in white sneered and said, "That's why, Brother Gu, your name is really good. Gu Chaoyang is only watching coldly from the sidelines. The tea that belongs to you is slowly cooling down. There's no taste of tea anymore." The man in gray shook his head and said softly, the tea is cold, but the fragrance is still there. The fragrance doesn't dissipate, but it's in the heart." He lifted his head to look at the man in white. "The tea is cold for me and you, but the tea is still boiling for the others. The fragrance of the tea is still distant, undiminished by thousands of mountains and rivers." The man in white laughed. "Brother Gu, we've been brothers for many years, we're very close. I really don't want to torment you. I only need you to tell me this." The man in gray said faintly, "The tea is cold. Do you still believe what I said?" The man in white was stunned. The man in gray said, "If I told you that the 9 Supremes are all dead, would you believe me? If I told you that someone is still alive, would you believe me?" The man in white said, I can buy your information. The man in gray sighed softly and said, Heaven's Inquisition is dead. Who are you going to buy it from? But Gu Chaoyang is still alive. The man in white said, Then tell me, is anyone from the 9 Supremes still alive? The man in gray nodded faintly. I've told you before, everything is God's will. The man in white guffawed. This young brother has never believed in God's will. With a guffaw, he suddenly soared into the sky and turned into a cloud in the sky. In the depths of his eyes that no one could see, there was a deep pain that seemed to be trembling. Facing the morning sun, an indistinct mist seemed to rise from the corners of his eyes. Finally, when there was only one last candied hawse left, Yunyang wiped the skewer clean and carefully kept it, along with the last candied hawse, into his sleeves. He murmured, Just take it that you all bought it for me. Facing the sun, he smiled brightly and said softly, I'm living very well. Chapter 119. Yunyang first went to the west of the city and walked around the slums. Seeing the smiles on the faces of the disabled warriors, he felt much more at ease. He then went to the south of the city, then the east, west, and north. Yunyang walked very quickly. Each step seemed soft and relaxed, but in reality he had already covered dozens of feet. Fang Mafei held his breath as he followed him, not leaving him by even an inch. It was also during this afternoon that many people in the capital city felt as if they had seen a young master. He had an extraordinary bearing and was tall and handsome. It was as if he had walked a circle in front of their eyes. Yunyang's pace was swift and he had the help of his lightness skill, but it was already midnight after he had walked around the entire Tiantang city. He had not done anything but walk around for the entire day. He was like a lonely lion that was silently patrolling his territory. With pride and loneliness, he looked at the people who lived and worked in peace under his wings with satisfaction. When he returned, Lao Mei came up to him with a pale face. Old Marshal Chiu is here today. The corners of Yunyang's lips twitched. If it were not for him, he would have gone out for a whole day. He asked faintly, What is it? I heard that you left early in the morning. Old Marshal was furious. Lao Mei looked conflicted. Before he left, he shattered our stone lion with a slap. Looking at the shattered stone lion, the corners of Yunyang's lips twitched for a long time. Finally he clapped his hands and praised, Old Marshal is still strong despite his age. Congratulations. He paused for a moment before continuing, Go and order 100 stone lions tomorrow. Place 2 of them here each time. When Old Marshal comes over, they'll appease him. Lao Mei's face was filled with shock. You mean, you don't plan to see him anymore? If Lao Mei did not know of Yunyang's other identity, he would have tried to dissuade him. However, Lao Mei's stance had changed. He stood firmly on Yunyang's side and approved of all of Yunyang's decisions. Even if the other party was Old Marshal Chiu, it would not matter. Thus he skipped this topic and moved on to another visitor. General Tai Zheng was here too. Lao Mei said, He brought a few boxes of the border's specialty fruits for Marquis Yun. Yunyang sighed. Tai Zheng, he's already so poor. Why would he bring fruits? Where are the fruits? He was eaten by those kittens. Lao Mei was speechless. Yunyang was exasperated as well. Right, what did the old marshal say before he left? Cough, it's better if you don't convey it. It's better if I don't know about it. Yunyang had already changed his mind. Let's eat. Eating is a serious matter. It was a pity that he couldn't stop eating. While they were eating, the 4 young masters came looking for them again. Boss, wah. I'm here again. Dong Qianling's unique voice was like a signature. Boss. Chen Wanfeng, Xia Bingchuan, Chiu Yunsan and Dong Qianling. Spring, summer, autumn and winter had all gathered here with Yunyang. Yunyang sighed. Looking at these 4 fellows, he could not help but think of the 4 Seasons Tower. I knew boss was eating. The 4 of us haven't eaten either. Dong Qianling chuckled, purposely putting on a I'm the closest to boss attitude. He then turned around and called out, Steward, come bring 4 more sets of cups and chopsticks. We're going to drink to our heart's content today. We won't go home until we're drunk. Lao Mei rolled his eyes at the fellow's lack of courtesy but went to get them anyway. After a while, Dong Qianling finally got to the point. Boss, about the mystical beast you mentioned earlier, guaranteed? Yunyang did not beat around the bush. Then, the luminary paste, will there really be a problem? Chiu Yunsan asked hesitantly. Have you gotten it? Yunyang asked. Not yet. All in all, it's better to be careful. Yunyang reminded, never let your guard down. The 4 of them nodded solemnly, lowering their heads to drink quietly. The excitement in their hearts had long dissipated. The atmosphere of the night was destined to be gloomy. Yin-Yang was in low spirits. Just as the five of them were drinking in silence, a ray of sword light flashed in the south of Tiantang City. A lean silhouette carrying a huge wine gourd on his back appeared in front of Tiantang City's gate, his gaze tinged with nostalgia. Back again. He wondered how the young lady from back then was doing. I've come back this time for something. Let's finish what we have to do and get the item first. After all, it can't be delayed any longer. The man smiled faintly. He glided into the city gate. Just as Yun-Yang and the rest were drinking and bantering, suddenly, bang bang bang, someone knocked on the door. Someone called out from outside, "Excuse me, is young Master Yun at home?" It was already late at night. Lao Mei frowned and said, "This voice is rather familiar. It's the voice of Qin-san whom young Master saved the other day." Qin-san? Yun-Yang frowned. There must be something urgent for him to come so late at night. Let him in quickly. Not long after, Qin-san came in hurriedly and knelt down. Young Master, please save my brothers." He kowtowed profusely. Yun-Yang frowned and said, "What happened? Stand up and speak." Yun-Yang could clearly see that Qin-san was limping and his face was covered in scars. However, the scars seemed to have been there for quite some time. "Qin-san?" Yun-Yang's eyes shone with understanding. "Did you go to the battle with the remaining soldiers?" Qin-san was stunned for a moment, then said in shame, "Young Master, please understand. Qin-san did go to the battlefield, but I only met the enemy in one battle. Not only did I not kill a single enemy, but I came back covered in wounds. I've really lost face for young Master." Yun-Yang said seriously, "What are you saying? There are things a man shouldn't do, but there are things he must do. You're a man of steel when you go to battle. Whether you kill the enemy or not is insignificant. Have all the brothers who went with you returned?" The rims of Qin-san's eyes reddened. "Young Master, Qin-san is here because of this matter. After we retired from the army, we gathered together and lived together. Everyone looked out for each other and helped each other. Our days were bitter, but we lived in harmony. This time our area also sent out 43 people. We lost 11 brothers in the previous battle, but 32 were lucky enough to return. But these few days, some of these brothers have been going missing. In the beginning we thought they went out to catch up with their comrades after the battle, but more and more of them have been going missing, and they're all veterans who participated in the war." Qin-san's voice was tearful. "As of tonight, 9 people have gone missing. We don't know what's going on, but we can vaguely feel that these missing brothers will never come back." He was trembling all over. As a disabled veteran at the bottom of society, his world was only so big. The only person he knew from the upper class was Yin-Yang, who had helped him when he was bullied. Now that something like this had happened, coming to Yin-Yang for help was the best he could do after a long period of hesitation. It was also the only life-saving straw in his heart. Yin-Yang stood up abruptly, his eyes glinting. "A large number of veterans have gone missing?" A murderous aura suddenly surged out. Dong Qianling and the other 3 who were closer to Yin-Yang shuddered without exception. How could such a murderous aura emanate from a young master of a noble family like Yin-Yang? It was the aura of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. "I'll go take a look." Yin-Yang stood up. "Let's go together." Dong Qianling and the rest stood up as well. "You don't have to go." Yin-Yang said calmly, "The more people, the bigger the target. If I really need your help, I'll let you know. I won't be courteous." Chiu Yin-san patted his chest. "Don't worry, boss. When the time comes, as long as boss says the word, we'll provide you with manpower, money and strength." With a wave of his hand, Yin-Yang led Fang Mafei and Lao Mei out the door, leaving behind a single word, "You guys play on your own for now." After a quarter of an hour, Yin-Yang and the rest appeared in the south of the city, coming to a residential area that looked rather deserted. Every house in this area was very dilapidated. Although it was already late at night, when Qin-san brought Yin-Yang into the yard, they could still see 23 burly men standing up in an orderly fashion. These men, without exception, were all injured or disabled. Other than that, there were some old soldiers who were blind and had broken legs standing up as well. However, a few of them had broken legs and could not even stand properly, still leaning against the wall with a solemn expression on their faces. Indignation could hardly be concealed on these people's faces. "Young Master Yun is here." Qin-san's voice was excited. "Young Master, please seek justice for us." Everyone knelt down in unison. "Everyone get up quickly." Yin-Yang felt a rush of warmth. "What is going on? Everyone tell us first. Let us analyze the whole story. What is going on?" Under Yin-Yang's beckoning, Everyone quickly sat in a circle and began narrating the events that had transpired. Fang Mafei had already floated up to the roof. With Fang Mafei, a 7th peak pinnacle expert, as a lookout, it was already considered safe in a place like this. As the crowd continued to talk, Yunyang gradually formed a general outline of the current strange situation. For 9 consecutive days, there had been a missing soldier every day, and all of them had gone missing from this area. Everyone was in the same trench, comrades who had gone through thick and thin together. It was only logical that they could understand each other and have a tacit understanding. However, amidst the crowd's discussion, Yunyang unexpectedly realized that the 9 missing people were the closest to each other and had the most tacit understanding. No, to be more precise, other than the 9 of them, their relationship with the other old soldiers was only average. However, they were truly devoted to each other. There were still 2 people among the remaining people who were closest to them. At this moment, it was also these 2 who appeared to be the most anxious. In spite of this, Yunyang had also confirmed from these 2 that although they were on good terms with the 9 missing people, it was still far from the friendship between the 9 of them. Disappearing mysteriously, Yunyang's brows were tightly knitted together. One goes missing every day, but since the day before yesterday, no one has gone missing anymore. Chapter 120. Disappearances mostly happen to children or kidnappings and extortion of rich young masters and young ladies, but it rarely happened to adult men, especially these disabled soldiers who had nothing on them. They lived in extreme poverty and could barely maintain their food and clothing. Even if they kidnapped and blackmailed, and even if the blackmail was successful, how much profit could they get? What was even more ridiculous was the fact that 9 people had been kidnapped consecutively for 9 days. What kind of logic was this? Yunyang's train of thought stopped abruptly. A thought flashed through his mind as his face turned pale. 9 days. 9 people. Why 9 days? Why were there 9 people? Yunyang suddenly thought of a horrifying possibility. He thought about it with difficulty and said, "Everyone go back first. If I'm not wrong, something like this shouldn't happen again." Chin-san asked, "Young master, what do you mean?" Yunyang heaved a long sigh. "There's something more to this incident. It should be related to a sinister arcane skill that requires 9 people to activate. I think I know the cause and effect of this. Honestly, I hope that I'm wrong. Otherwise, the consequences will be dire." He took out a parcel from his robe and opened it with some difficulty. It was filled with glistening yellow gold, but Yunyang had never realized that the gold's color was so blinding. He said softly, "I'll have to trouble all of you to help settle the 9 brothers' families. Send these gold ingots over on my behalf." Dozens of men knelt on the ground simultaneously. "Thank you, young master. On behalf of our missing brothers, we thank young master for your great kindness." Great kindness? Yunyang chuckled bitterly, his face full of despair. Could a few gold ingots really buy the life of a hero who had sacrificed his life for the country and its people? If it was possible, I, Yunyang, am willing to spend all my wealth to raid and plunder the world, to get as much gold as I can. However, he could not. How could these glistening gold ingots be equivalent to a hero's life? At most, they could only make up for his guilt. It was really just a token of his gratitude. Yunyang walked out of the desolate alley, feeling the rage within him shoot straight to his very soul. He took out the 9 heavens dictum almost without hesitation. This time, Yunyang used the real 9 heavens dictum. It was not the kind of token that the brothers used to have. This was the only token in the residence of 9 supremes. The token itself seemed to be surrounded by a faint purple light. Yunyang thought about it and took out his 7th brother Supreme Blood's token, pasting it on the 9 heavens dictum. Then, holding the orb of blood in his hand, he issued a direct command. Streaks of blood-like rays of light shot out from the 9 heavens dictum. Check. Have there been any disabled soldiers or soldiers in service who have gone missing? If they did, would they disappear for 9 consecutive days? 9 missing people? If there is such news, report it immediately without any delay. The blood-red light flashed and disappeared. On this very night. In countless places, countless people and countless secrets, all of them had tears streaming down their faces. Looking at the 9 heavens dictum that was shining with a pure blood-red light, countless people were overwhelmed with emotions. They were so excited that they could not speak. Supreme Blood Lord finally appeared again. This is the true 9 heavens command. Countless people leaped up and rushed up at an unprecedented speed to check the contents of the 9 heavens dictum. Immediately, everyone spread out and investigate. Go and investigate immediately. the faster the better. We must come up with the most detailed investigation results in the shortest time possible. Quick, quick, quick. Supreme Bloodlord's first command after his return. If we don't investigate thoroughly, we don't have to live to embarrass Supreme Bloodlord anymore. Quick. We must be quick. Everyone else is on the move. Our dictum of blood is the direct force of Supreme Bloodlord. If we fall behind the others, we can just commit suicide together. After Yun-Yang returned, the Nine Heavens dictum was stuck to his chest. He could vaguely feel that there was a constant stream of news. From the messages, the agitation and anxiety of the messenger could be seen. Boss, you're back. Supreme Bloodlord, our boss, when will he be back? Supreme Bloodlord, our Water Lord, Supreme Bloodlord, our Lord Yun. Looking at the anxious and hopeful messages, Yun-Yang could completely feel the anxiety, urgency, and cautiousness on the messenger's face. Faced with such news, Yun-Yang felt like his heart was frying in oil, unable to deal with it. For a moment, he was in so much pain that his heart almost spasmed, unable to speak. Do your job well. Yun-Yang replied in unison. Looking at the deep night sky, Yun-Yang only wanted to roar at the top of his lungs and vent his frustration. However, after looking at it for a long time, he finally heaved a long drawn-out sigh. It was only the wee hours of the morning when the Nine Heavens dictum began to shine with news. Concentrated around Tiantang City's territory, there had been disappearances of battle-hardened soldiers since about a year and a half ago. There had been a total of 3 incidents where 9 people had disappeared each time. The first time was a year and a half ago. In the second month, 9 battle-hardened soldiers had gone missing in the west of Tiantang City. There was no news of them at all. The second time was after the 9th of the 3rd month last year. Starting from the 15th of the 3rd month, 9 battle-hardened soldiers had gone missing in the north of Tiantang City for 9 consecutive days. The third time was the current one in the south of Tiantang City. The 3 disappearances had one thing in common. The 9 missing people were very close to each other. What each of them had in common was that they were veterans who had gone through hundreds of battles, veterans who had taken at least 3 lives in their hands. It's because of the 9 Supremes indeed. It's the spectral path of the soul, the abyss path of the flesh. Yun-Yang sucked in a deep breath and ordered once more, from today onwards, all forces are to focus on the east of Tiantang City. Once you discover the disappearance of the remaining soldiers, inform me immediately without delay. Once the order was given, Yun-Yang fell silent. The Four Seasons Tower had actually used such an extremely vicious method. The spectral path of the soul, the abyss path of the flesh was an extremely vicious and unorthodox method of locating that was not very effective. Only when one wanted to find a person but was unable to do so, or even had a rough grasp of the person's location, would they use this most extreme and inefficient method. The efficiency of this method was not high, but the conditions for its implementation were not low at all. Perhaps it should be said that it was extremely harsh. The first condition was to find 9 people who were very close to each other, and these 9 people had to be extremely loyal to the person you were looking for. Secondly, these 9 people had to have a fighting soul. The so-called fighting soul was the soul of the battlefield. In other words, only people who had been on a proper battlefield and were fearless on the battlefield could possess such a fighting soul. Having a fighting soul alone was not enough, one had to have a murderous aura as well. A person who was extremely vicious would have a murderous aura. He would have a murderous aura when he raided, even when he slaughtered pigs and cows. However, the murderous aura on the battlefield was not the usual kind of murderous aura, it was a kind of murderous aura that had been accumulated through hundreds of battles. Killing 1 enemy would remove the anxiety and fear. Killing 2 enemies would make one fearless and increase one's bravery. Killing 3 enemies would make one invincible and the murderous aura would rise. This meant that when some battle-hardened soldiers returned to their hometowns from the battlefield, they would sometimes smile and greet people, but it would make people feel that they were afraid to approach them, afraid to get close to them, a sense of fear that would grow in their hearts. This was the murderous aura. The murderous aura was real. It would only disappear after a long period of peace. Only when all the above conditions were met could the spectral path of the soul and the abyss path of flesh be activated. Perhaps it should be said that the so-called spectral path of the soul and the abyss path of flesh was to throw the souls of such people into the altar and search for the location of the person they were looking for using an extremely evil arcane method. This method was very mysterious, but it was evil to the extreme and the efficiency was extremely low. Yun-Yang had only heard of it in legends. Not only did he feel disdain towards such arcane methods, he even despised them. He had never thought that there would be a day when such an evil and heartless act would happen around him, and it was done to search for him. The love of life and death, the murderous army, the spectral path of the soul, the abyss path of flesh. The Four Seasons Tower. Yun-Yang uttered the 3 words word by word. They were like the ice shards of an ancient iceberg, chilling to the bone. Emmy, I want to go into closed-door cultivation. Yun-Yang was furious. Summon all the energy that you've been suppressing. I want to ascend to the 5th peak. Yun-Yang could no longer care about stabilizing his realm or solid foundation. All he wanted was to become more powerful. As long as his cultivation base broke through to the 5th peak of mystical chi, he could ascend to the 4th stage of mystique wind conjuration, the 5th stage of fog of cloud conjuration, and the 4th stage of fiery charm. He could also cultivate supreme blood and supreme thunder's cultivation methods at the same time. By then, his ability to maneuver would increase tremendously. He would be more confident and have more tricks up his sleeves when facing the Four Seasons Tower. It doesn't matter how you deal with me or the 9 Supremes. We'll just fight based on our own abilities. Yun-Yang was furious. But why do you want to kill the veterans? They're the heroes of the country, the heroes of the people. They fought for the country, not forgetting to serve the country even when they're handicapped. Each of them is a man of steel. Each of them deserves to be ashamed for 3 lifetimes. Yet you're so insane as to kill such heroic men to achieve your goals? I'll do as you wish. When I appear before you, don't blame me for being merciless. Yun-Yang's eyes glinted with a murderous glint. Perhaps the Four Seasons Tower did not expect that it was because of their extreme methods that Yun-Yang would make such a crazy decision. Perhaps it was just like the saying, heaven is watching what man does. Karma and reincarnation had to be repaid. Chapter 121. It was autumn now. The autumn wind gradually turned chilly. After an autumn rain, it added a sense of desolation to the atmosphere. The autumn wind howled above Tiantang City, not stopping for the entire day. Almost every Yutang citizen, especially those who were once in the military, could not help but lift their heads to look when they heard the howling wind. Sometimes, the sound of the wind is the movement of our God of protectors, Supreme Wind, controlling the winds of the world. However, Qintang's wind was howling all day long now. Where had the heroes of the past gone? 3 days later, early morning. Above Tiantang City, the howling of the wind could be heard. The autumn wind had come again. Fallen leaves fluttered in the air. Dust and fog filled the air. The wind today seemed to be much stronger than usual. Yun-Yang came out from his closed-door cultivation in the secret chamber. With a sway of his body, he turned into a gust of wind and soared into the sky soundlessly, merging with the howling autumn wind in the sky. The autumn wind began to feel strange at once. The spectral path of the soul, the abyss of the flesh. Caused by the murderous aura, the resentment that surges to the heavens, the sinister wind and the fog of the soul have their origins. Where the evil exists, heaven has eyes. Yun-Yang knew. Any person or organization that used such an extreme method would definitely be forsaken by heaven and man, hated by both gods and ghosts. This itself was an act that went against the natural order. Similarly, Yun-Yang, who understood the enemy's sinister tricks, only needed to observe where the murderous aura was. The place with the heaviest yin qi would be his target. The autumn wind suddenly spun, forming a tornado in the air. At that moment, the fallen leaves that were drifting in the air of Tiantang City suddenly spun once again. They formed a pillar of tornado in the air that connected the sky and the earth. Then the tornado changed its direction continuously. Such a situation had happened frequently in the past. Therefore, to the people it was not strange at all. They all thought that it was just an ordinary weather phenomenon. The south of the city, as the tornado swept past, the falling leaves fluttered in the air like helpless butterflies. The south of the city was fine. It was a peaceful scene as far as the eye could see. There was no trace of murderous aura. Yun-Yang continued to maintain the tornado as he headed towards the west of the city. Since the Four Seasons Tower had done so and left the east side of the city untouched, it seemed like the most suspicious point should be the east side of the city. However, Yun-Yang understood that the east side of the city was where most of the defeated soldiers gathered and where the poor gathered. It was difficult to find a place to set up the bizarre sacrificial ritual of spectral path of soul, abyss path of flesh. The deeper reason was that the places with the deepest resentment were usually the rich people's districts or the officials' districts. And the places with the deepest resentment were the imperial cities and the royal palaces. It was the same for every country. No matter how enlightened the monarch was, the palace was still the place where the most grievances were concentrated. There were not many wealthy people in the east side of Tiantang City. Most of them were gathered in the north, west, south, and center. The east side of the city had become the area with the least amount of resentment. When Yun Yang had soared into the sky with the tornado earlier, he had already roughly surveyed the locations. Other than the palace in the center that was filled with resentment, the south, west, and north were the strongest. The east side of the city, on the other hand, was peaceful. Now he only needed to comb through it slowly. Yun Yang was not in a hurry combing through it bit by bit. It was an arduous task. After more than an hour, the tornado disappeared. The autumn wind was still howling, but it had turned into a gust of wind in the west side of the city. All the streets and alleys had turned into air vents. Strong winds whistled through every alley, every narrow street, and every main street. The wind did not subside for a whole day and night. When Yun Yang returned to the residence of Yun, his face was as pale as a sheet, like a ghost. He had only eaten a few mouthfuls of food and he had almost fallen asleep. He was truly exhausted. After a short rest, Yun Yang entered the state of cultivation again. He had to persevere no matter how tired he was. Other than searching for the location of the murderous aura, his current mission was to cultivate. Only by greatly increasing his ability could he have the ability to handle the upcoming storm. In the middle of the night, the autumn wind blew again. For 3 consecutive days, the unprecedentedly violent autumn wind blew the streets of Tiantang City clean. Not even the dust could be seen. Why is it so strange this year? This autumn wind is endless. Yes, in the past, when the autumn wind blew during the day, it should have stopped at night, especially during the second half of the night. This year, however, the longer it gets, the more it sounds like a ghost wailing. It gives one goosebumps. That's right. I didn't pay much attention to it at first. It really is an evil wind. Among the crowd, a man with a cold expression did not join in the conversation. He only listened quietly, a hint of joy flashing in his eyes as he strode away. At a secret location. A few people sat in a circle with unusually solemn expressions while a few others were walking over quickly. Brothers, perhaps it's good news. What good news? The autumn wind has been blowing continuously these days. It's very uncanny. Don't you all think it's odd? Autumn wind. Do you mean? This autumn wind looks normal, but if you look at the past few years, it might not be very normal. The burly man who spoke had an excited expression on his face as he lowered his voice. We all know that Lord Blood appeared a few days ago, and issued an order. Actually, didn't Lord Wind and Lord Fire help in the previous battle? Although it said that it was the spirits of the 2 lords who had manifested to help, I, Qi Laolu, don't believe it. And the autumn wind is so strange now. The man called Qi Laolu seemed to be choked as tears welled up in his eyes. Could it be, our Lord Wind is making a move? When everyone heard this, their faces suddenly shook, and their eyes revealed expressions of surprise and joy. Calm down. The leader of the men looked calm as he hollered with a frown. Why are you all so agitated? What we need now is patience, absolute patience. Wait slowly. All of you be patient. Do you still remember what the 9 lords said? The 9 heavens dictum will always exist. You're only starting to doubt now. The burly and steady man's voice couldn't help but tremble. His eyes were also sparkling and his lips were trembling. However, he pretended to be calm and laughed loudly. I have never believed that the 9 lords would die. Everyone do your jobs. Everyone do your jobs well. The steady man's gaze was cold. If anyone makes a mistake, and loses face for the lords, don't blame me, Boss Zhao, for saying something unpleasant. What do you mean by saying something unpleasant? Everyone laughed together. If anyone makes a mistake, everyone will swarm up and beat him to death. Boss Zhao snorted and said, why is the 9 heavens dictum not in a mess when the 9 lords are missing? Because everyone believes that the 9 lords will definitely come back. Therefore, the more the bosses are not around, the more the people in the 9 halls have to compete with each other. They are all preparing their troops and all of them are doing proper things. We must not lose face for Master Feng. Most importantly, we must keep our mouths shut, act fast, and be secretive. Boss Zhao's gaze was as sharp as a knife. The 9 lords are unprecedented heroes. We must not lose this reputation. Yes? Everyone dismiss. Boss Zhao stood up. Go back and keep an eye on your little bastards. If any of you make a mistake, even if we can't see it, we won't beat you to death. But ask your own conscience. Can you live with it? Do you have no face to live? The same conversation appeared in many secret places one after another. Now that Lord Shui has appeared, and now that the autumn wind is bewitching, I suspect that Lord Wind has also reappeared. Why is there still no news of our boss? But, the more it is like this, the more we need to be stable. If anyone makes Lord Wine lose face, I don't need to say it, everyone understands. Both Lord Wind and Lord Flame had fought at Tianshan Cliff, and now Lord Shui has reappeared. There has been no movement for such a long time, but now he has made such a big move. There must be a mastermind behind this. Our Lord Yun is known as the soul of the Nine Supremes. He has always been a strategist. This method of deceiving the world and playing everyone in the palm of his hand is Lord Yun's doing. It's not that I'm arrogant, but other than our Lord Yun, even if the other bosses were to plan it themselves, they would never be able to do it. Our Cloud School must not be outdone by the other families. Stay stable, work hard. Lord Yun will be back. The residence of Marshal. Is it really Lord Wind who has returned? Old Marshal Chiu paced back and forth while the old woman watched as this old man had already walked dozens of miles in his own yard. Old Marshal, His Majesty has summoned you. I'll go right away. The old Marshal did not even have time to change his clothes. He simply put on a large cloak and left the house on his horse. Yun Yang continued to search and filter. Finally, he had chosen 11 locations, all of which he thought were the most likely targets. The palace was the first to bear the brunt as the air of resentment was the heaviest. It could be said to be the best place to perform the demonic spell. The second place was the execution ground, the place where the most wanted criminals were executed. This was the place where most people died in Tiantang City, and it was also the best place to perform the demonic spell. However, what surprised Yun Yang was that the third, fourth, and fifth places were the Crown Prince's residence, the third Prince's residence, and the fourth Prince's residence. Among the princes of this dynasty, other than the few who had yet to grow up, the residences of those who had grown up had the heaviest air of resentment. Even the lowest ranked one was ranked 9th. Chapter 122. Yun Yang was a little dumbfounded by the outcome. What did these fellows do on a regular basis? There were 4 other places. The residence of the Grand Tutor, the residence of the Northern King, the residence of the Grand Commandant, and the residence of King Jing. Yun Yang committed them to memory. Out of these 11 places, one of them had to be the target. However, the more he was certain of it, the more furious Yun Yang became. The 11 suspects that he had identified were all people of high status and power. They were either members of the royal family or the families of the ministers who had the power to overturn the world. Thinking of this, Yun Yang could not help but feel a deep sense of sorrow. All of you are in high positions, living in luxury, taking whatever you want. Don't you know that the wealth, status, comfort, and enjoyment you have are all exchanged with the lives of the warriors who have fought outside? Just when all of you are enjoying all of this with a clear conscience, there are still people who have colluded with the Four Seasons Tower to kill meritorious officials. They are truly heartless and insane. Sometimes, Yun Yang even felt that he could not understand why such an act and such a thing would happen. Are you not Yutong's people? Furthermore, are you even human? How could a person be so shameless to this extent? Charge for the 5th peak tonight? Yun Yang gritted his teeth with a strong sense of resentment. Charge for the 5th stage of Fog of Cloud Conjuration and the 4th stage of Mystique Wind Conjuration. Tomorrow I must find out who the culprit is. If it's really any one of these 9 people, I will destroy this person at all costs. Yun Yang did not suspect His Majesty, not at all. Out of everyone here, the one who had the least reason to do so was His Majesty the Emperor. However, his son might not be so. Spiritual chi surged in from all directions. For 3 consecutive days Yun Yang had not completed his breakthrough. Emmy controlled the output of the chi of vitality precisely, allowing Yun Yang to stay on the edge of the breakthrough. However, he was just a little short, unable to break through. As for Yun Yang, he had transformed into the wind for the past few days, squeezing his mystical chi to the limit every day to ensure that his mystical chi had been depleted to its limit before he returned. Therefore he was as tired as a dead dog when he returned, unable to even stand properly. In spite of this, Yun Yang felt that he had improved tremendously each time he recovered from the extreme exhaustion. Under such extreme exhaustion and extreme training that kept him on the edge of a breakthrough, Yun Yang's cultivation base was further stabilized and strengthened. However, Yun Yang did not want to drag it out any longer. Forceful breakthrough. Emmy was helpless as well. According to Emmy's opinion, it would take at least another day to maintain the extreme exhaustion and the training on the edge of a breakthrough. It would be more appropriate to ensure that it could recover its energy 5 to 6 times at the very least. However, as its owner Yun Yang had spoken, Emmy could only do as he was told. Other than the surging mystical energy that gathered from the sky, there was also an even purer and surging spiritual energy that surged out from the green vines, Yun-yang could only feel the quaking barrier of the fifth peak crumbling almost instantaneously. Countless stars appeared before his eyes as if a universe had suddenly exploded in his mind. Although his eyes were closed, he could still feel the heaven and earth collapsing abruptly, followed by a sea of vibrant colors. That feeling, Yun-yang suddenly felt that his horizons had been broadened. It was as if some things had been right before his eyes, but he had turned a blind eye to them, unable to notice them no matter what. It was only after breaking through the current level that he realized that he had neglected so much. It was an exceptionally wonderful feeling. Once he thought about it, Yun-yang could not help recalling what Supreme Earth, who had the highest cultivation base among his brothers, had once said, "Only when one breaks through the fifth peak and sees the fifth heaven can he feel that he's actually just a frog at the bottom of a well. Before breaking through to the fifth heaven, he won't even have the self-awareness to know that he's a frog at the bottom of a well." When Yun-yang had heard this, he had only smiled, wondering if his boss was exaggerating a little too much. However, it was only today that he understood it after experiencing it for himself. This sentence was the truth. Some of them were even incomplete. Fifth peak. Yun-yang had only experienced the novelty for less than a quarter of an hour before he began to meditate again. Fog of cloud conjuration, mystique wind conjuration, fiery charm. He began to cultivate. Yun-yang was racing against time. He had to elevate his cultivation base, ability, and mystical skill in the shortest amount of time possible. He had to charge forward courageously. Cultivation, other than being his true asset to protect himself, was also. Yun-yang felt that he could be closer to his brothers in the cultivation atmosphere, and he could feel the closeness when they were still together. The breakthrough of the fog of cloud conjuration was a natural process for Yun-yang. The breakthrough of the mystique wind conjuration was not that difficult either. When his cultivation base had reached the required level, he would naturally break through. However, the progress of the fiery charms cultivation was entirely different from the other two. Even when his cultivation base was sufficient, it would still take a considerable amount of time to break through to the original level. Up until midnight, the fiery charms still had not broken through to the fourth stage. However, Yun-yang was already very satisfied with his current progress. Now that his cultivation base had reached the fifth peak, he could already be considered an expert. Well, comparatively speaking, that was indeed the case. The fifth peak of mystical chi was the beginning of the fifth heaven. The fifth stage of fog of cloud conjuration was the beginning. The fourth stage of mystique wind conjuration was the same level as supreme wind back then. This level was enough. It was enough to deal with the current situation. Yun-yang, whose cultivation base and ability had improved tremendously, floated out gleefully. The residence of Crown Prince. The Crown Prince was still fuming over the disappearance of Shui Yuehan. After Shui Yuehan's disappearance, the four noble families of spring, summer, autumn and winter had been coming to pick a fight. His Highness, who was already under house arrest, was not in a good mood. He had been pressured time and time again, yet he had no choice but to speak nicely to them. Naturally, his mood had worsened, and he was already feeling extremely aggrieved. This Shui Yuehan. I don't understand. How could such a smart person do such a stupid thing? Thinking about it now, His Highness was infuriated. He would have been fine by daybreak, but he broke out of the prison and escaped before daybreak? Did he really need half a night's time? His Highness's handsome face was filled with conflict and anger. Isn't this just looking for trouble? Your Highness. A white-haired, kind-looking elder beside the Crown Prince mused for a moment before speaking softly. This old and useless one has a different opinion on this matter. Crown Prince, huh? It's been some time since the incident. The elder spoke slowly. If Shui Yuehan wasn't dead, he should have informed us, but he didn't. We would never betray him, nor would we simply hand him over. Shui Yuehan has always been loyal to the Crown Prince's residence for so many years, and he's quite intelligent as well. There's really no reason for him to do such a thing. The white-bearded elder said faintly, therefore this old and useless one thinks that Shui Yuehan is most likely dead. He was already dead before the news of the prison break spread. The one who created the illusion of a prison break was someone else. And that Fu Guansan should be dead as well. All of this is a ploy by someone with ulterior motives. The white-bearded elder looked mournful as he said, otherwise, there's no way to explain everything. Taking a step back, even if Shui Yuehan really did break out of the prison, there's no need for him to ambush those popinjays. That would be the real problem of creating new problems. If he really wanted to flee for his life, why would he offend the spring, summer and winter families? You must know that attacking the three of them at that moment was equivalent to sowing irreconcilable enmity with the three families. The so-called mercy was just a smokescreen. If one were to think deeper, it would not be difficult to understand. No, it was a ploy to further deepen the enmity between Shui Yuehan and the Popinjays, completely crushing the enmity between both parties. The Crown Prince's face gradually turned pale. Dead. Are there no other possibilities? The white-bearded elder said confidently, it's most likely so. Shui Yuehan and Han Wufei were sworn brothers. They were so close that it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they'd gone through life and death together. Both of them had roamed the martial world for many years before coming to serve under your highness. If Shui Yuehan wasn't dead, he would have told Han Wufei even if he was hesitant to tell us. On the side, the handsome Han Wufei wore a sorrowful expression. Brother Shui must have been murdered. Your highness, please help Brother Shui. You can't let him die unjustly and bear this inexplicable stain. That's a huge crime for a prison break. The Crown Prince sat down slowly and said, if Shui Yuehan really died in the Board of Punishments, then who was the one who did it? The white-bearded elder sat in silence, his eyes looking at the other strategists. However, the others did not say anything. Instead, they all stared at him. There was only one meaning in their words: continue speaking. This old man will just say it to get the ball rolling. Please add on later. The white-bearded elder smiled helplessly and said, as for who killed Shui Yuehan and Fu Guansan, this old man thinks that there are only a few targets on the surface. The group perked up when they heard the elder. The third prince's side is undoubtedly the most suspicious. Shui Yuehan was an important person in the Crown Prince's residence. His death would definitely be a huge blow to the residence's strength. Moreover, after this matter, the Crown Prince will be in conflict with the Ministry of Justice, and will form enmity with the Spring, Autumn, and Winter clans. He will make many strong enemies for no reason, while the third prince's side will not be exposed at all. He will perfectly stay out of this matter. Of course, the fourth prince, the fifth prince, and the sixth prince might have done the same. The reason why the third prince is the most suspicious is that he's currently favored by the emperor. Once His Highness the Crown Prince loses power, he'll benefit the most. Apart from the princes, there are also the people from the four great clans. Even the two old marshals of the military are suspects. Perhaps I should put it this way: as long as it's a person or force that benefits from this incident, they're all suspects. The only difference is how suspicious they are and how much they can benefit from it. Only the Ministry of Penalty, which is at the center of the whirlpool in this case and is also under great pressure right now, is the least suspicious. Chapter 123. As he spoke, the crowd nodded in agreement, deep in thought. However, other than the people on the surface, I have another suspicion. The white-bearded elder paused for a moment before saying faintly, I suspect that this could be the doing of the 9 Supremes. 9 Supremes? Everyone was stunned at the same time. The Crown Prince's expression changed as well as he asked hurriedly, why do you say so? There was a hint of hesitation on the white-bearded elder's face as he said, This old and useless one is only guessing. There's no evidence to speak of. Therefore it's only a guess. The Crown Prince's expression sank slowly, his gaze flickering with a complicated and indecipherable meaning. After a while, the Crown Prince suddenly said in a low voice, if the 9 Supremes' forces are really involved, why would they be involved in this? There must be a reason. Also, what benefits can they gain from this? No one could answer the Crown Prince's question. If they were to continue thinking about it, the consequences would be too horrifying. The final extension of this theory did not mean that the 9 Supremes were targeting the Crown Prince. Let's put this theory aside for now. After all, there's no evidence or sign that the 9 Supremes are really involved in this matter, the Crown Prince murmured as if trying to console himself. The white-bearded elder said with a smile while stroking his beard, it's good to put it aside for now. After all, this is just this old and useless one's feeling. I don't have any evidence myself. In terms of suspicion and related benefits, the 9 Supremes are indeed the least suspicious. However, the more he said so, the more anxious the Crown Prince felt. Had the 9 Supremes really made a move? The 9 Supremes never seemed to focus on benefits when they did things. The so-called least suspicious was meaningless. Similar secret conversations took place almost every day in the residences of the princes. All sorts of guesses were made, but it was still difficult to come to a conclusion. After all, how could there be truth without concrete evidence? However, for some reason all the discussions would stop when they reached the level of the 9 Supremes. Silence reigned. A gust of autumn wind blew in the sky. Yun Yang had searched every corner of the 10 targets, but he still could not find any trace of them. He was not discouraged, instead he became more serious. It would be strange if he could find out the Four Seasons Tower's meticulous setup so easily. To deal with the Four Seasons Tower, patience was required. Just as he was about to return to the residence of Yun after completing his search for the day, suddenly he felt something. An abnormally powerful aura seemed to appear behind him on his right, but it disappeared in a flash. Yun Yang immediately felt that something was amiss. Instinctively, he moved towards the direction of the breeze. Autumn was high and the clouds were light. The autumn wind blew. The government's meeting for the day had ended. The white-bearded old man staggered out of the room. Han Wufei followed behind him. "I'll send old He back, and also to thank old He for speaking up for my brother's sake and generosity tonight." Elder He chuckled and said in a doddering manner, "Then I'll have to trouble you, Lord Han. This old man is indeed a little tired. I can also chat with Lord Han along the way. The atmosphere in the conference hall is a bit heavy after all." Hearing their words, the Crown Prince dispelled the idea of having someone escort them. He then said, "If that's the case, I wish the two of you a safe journey. Have a good night." In reality, the Crown Prince was exhausted as well, but he had to maintain his courteous demeanor. Seeing that everyone had left, he subconsciously yawned and went back to rest. Both old He and Han Wufei walked out of the residence of Crown Prince and walked slowly along the street in silence. Under the starlight, the age spots on old He's face could be seen clearly. His legs seemed to be trembling as he walked. He had one foot in the grave, it was obvious. After a long time, when they arrived in front of the old He's door, Han Wufei finally spoke in a low voice. "Old He, isn't it too early to bring up the topic of the 9 Supremes now?" Old He's gaze glinted as he replied faintly, "Han Wufei." The 3 words were uttered with a pause. The old man exuded an imposing aura. Although it was fleeting, the domineering aura made Han Wufei break out in cold sweat and shiver. It was the sudden appearance of this powerful aura that alerted Yun Yang, who was in the air. Yes, it is this subordinate's fault. However, this subordinate still thinks that if we bring up this matter to the Crown Prince now, the disadvantages outweigh the advantages. We don't have proof after all. Han Wufei explained hurriedly, "If we're not careful, we might alert the enemy instead." The gentle autumn breeze blew across the sky, leaving no trace as it passed. The white-bearded elder said faintly, "You don't have to worry about this, I have." Halfway through his words, old He suddenly paused. A massive aura like an erupting volcano rose abruptly as he lifted his head and hollered, "Come down." 2 words. It was like 2 claps of thunder in the clear sky. His bony palm flipped and struck towards the sky. Countless sharp gusts of wind swept out, instantly forming layers of sharp forces that looked like an inescapable net, suddenly flying towards the sky. Not only was old He's attack ferocious, the range of his attack was even wider, enveloping an area of over 30 meters. With a hum, even the autumn wind in the sky seemed to have been dispersed by the palm. An extremely deep and sinister black hole had appeared in the sky at the moment of his attack. It was as if it could devour everything in this world. The extreme eeriness and terror was spreading from the black hole. The autumn wind was extinguished, but it was still there, barely discernible in the sky. The cool autumn air was still refreshing. No matter how strong a man was, how could he extinguish the wind of nature? Old He stood in front of the door for a full quarter of an hour with an unprecedentedly serious expression. His ears were constantly paying attention to the movements in the air. After a long time, a suspicious look appeared in his eyes. He snorted and said, "Isn't it?" When old He made his move, Han Wufei had swiftly taken 3 steps back as well. His entire body was like an arrow on a bowstring, ready to shoot out at any time and attack with all his might. At the same time, when old He retracted his aura, Han Wufei came over again and asked in a low voice, "Old He, did you find anything?" Old He frowned, his gaze still roaming the sky as he said softly, "It's strange. I felt that there was an unusual change in the sound of the wind just now. There was even a subtle feeling of being watched. To be safe, I immediately made my move to test it out, but I didn't find anything out of the ordinary." Han Wufei's heart skipped a beat, his voice even softer as he said, "Old He, do you mean Supreme Wind?" The word was so soft that it was almost inaudible. To be able to spy on someone at such a close distance without leaving any trace, it could only be Supreme Wind's secret art of wind. Old He frowned and kept quiet for a while, his expression growing darker as he said, "If Supreme Wind isn't dead, then it wasn't an illusion that I sensed just now." Han Wufei's expression changed. Never underestimate the power of their special technique. Old He's face was solemn. In the future you must be more careful in everything you do. Think about what you say and do before you act. If you can't act, then don't act. Do you understand? Unless, there's a day when it's absolutely safe. Old He's eyes that seemed to be blurry from old age were now dark and deep, like the evil black hole that had appeared earlier. Yes. In the future, no matter where you are, don't mention these words if you don't have to. Old He warned again. Yes. Old He still did not enter, standing at the door with his arms behind his back, deep in thought with a frown. His eyes would look up at the sky from time to time as if waiting for something. After a long time, when even Han Wufei felt tired from standing, Old He finally said, "It seems like we should go back." With a flick of his sleeves, he turned and entered the residence. Only then did Han Wufei feel as if he had been pardoned. He bowed with cupped hands and turned to leave quickly. After walking another few feet, he activated his movement skill and disappeared at the end of the road like a wisp of green smoke. The sound of the wind was still soft, as if it could blow endlessly in the air. After a long while, Old He's frail body appeared at the door again, looking up without moving for a long time. After a long time, only when dawn broke in the east and a sliver of white appeared on the horizon, did Old He finally turn around and slowly walk back into the mansion. He was still muttering to himself, or rather he was talking to someone. "Lord Supreme Wind, if you're not dead, this old man will burn incense to thank the heavens. Yutong is in danger and the other countries of the continent are eyeing us. We really can't do without the 9 sirs." His voice was sincere. It was like an old man with one foot in the grave was praying sincerely to the heavens, making his most cherished wish. The sky was slowly brightening. Fang Mafei and Lao Mei were cultivating diligently in the residence, concentrating on improving themselves. Suddenly, a loud thud could be heard as a person fell from the sky. Fang Mafei was shocked, rushing forward like a flash of lightning to catch the person who had fallen. The person was dressed in purple robes. It was none other than Yun Yang. However, Yun Yang's face was pale as a sheet, his breaths coming in and out of breath. He looked like he could breathe his last at any time. Even his pupils were dilated. After seeing Fang Mafei's face clearly, Yun Yang finally heaved a sigh of relief. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and spat out 7 to 8 mouthfuls of blood. "These 3 days have been so dangerous, I'm so tired." It was Dong Tianling's voice. "You've entered the gates of hell, haven't you? What happened? Why did you suddenly get such a serious illness?" Fang Mafei's voice was heard. "We don't know either. We heard young master's loud cry that day and this happened. Something must have gone wrong in his cultivation. I've already fed him the few healing pills I brought with me." Dong Tianling's voice sounded relieved. "If it still doesn't work, I have no other choice. Thank you, young Master Dong, for lending a helping hand." "Don't say that, this is my boss. You don't understand the bond between us brothers. Forget a few pills even if boss wanted my wife." Cough, cough. No matter how tired Yun Yang was, the corners of his lips could not help twitching. "This be asterisk tc." Then he fainted again. What was different from before was that the endless divine art in his body had finally begun to circulate on its own to repair itself. When Yun Yang woke up again, it was already night time. The lamp was as lonely as a pea. Under the boundless night sky, there was a sense of desolation and desolation. His embrace was warm. The 3 eclipse panthers and the lightning cat were curled up in his embrace obediently, desperately trying to transfer the warmth from their tiny bodies to him. When Yun Yang woke up, the first thing he noticed was a small, soft paw carefully prodding at his eyelids. When Yun Yang opened his eyes abruptly, the tiny paw was obviously startled and instinctively scratched at his eyelids. Luckily, it stopped in time and stopped right in front of Yun Yang. It had almost disfigured his face. Then a joyful meow rang out. 4 snow-white little heads craned their necks to look over at the same time. Making sure that Yun Yang had really opened his eyes, they meowed in unison again. The 4 little fellows leaped up in unison with a swoosh and spun in the air. Their large tails swished wildly, their joy evident in every aspect as if they were about to explode. One of them even let out another meow and shot out like an arrow. He then saw Fang Mafei being dragged by the hair by the eclipse panther that had left. He begged for mercy as he walked. "Little ancestor, I'm here now. Stop pulling. Stop pulling. I dropped it. Young master, are you awake?" Yun Yang blinked with a smile. Yun Yang could clearly feel that his condition was improving. The pain all over his body had been reduced by half. Although it was still excruciating, it was not to the extent that he needed to avoid fainting. There was also the endless divine art circulating within his body. His dantian had begun to breathe automatically as well. Yunyang could also feel that Emi in his deific consciousness space was unprecedentedly exhausted. It retracted its vines at an extremely slow pace and curled into a ball, its leaves drooping as it began to absorb the energy within the space to nourish itself. It could be seen that Emi was the biggest contributor for him to be able to pull through this ordeal. However, Emi was already exhausted and its energy was greatly damaged. Fang Mafei helped Yunyang up and carefully passed him a bowl of medicinal ointment. This is the 500-year-old Lingji mushroom that Qiu Yunsan sent over this morning. It's brewed together with the imperial spirit liquid that Chun Wanfeng brought. Young master, drink it quickly. Replenishing your energy is the key now. Yunyang swallowed it in small mouthfuls. Once the medicinal ointment entered his stomach, he felt a surge of spiritual energy rushing to his limbs and bones. The droplets of inner energy in his dantian increased accordingly. Slowly, the numbness that filled his limbs faded away as well. He felt energized at once. Closing his eyes, he said softly, "This bowl of medicinal ointment is extraordinary. I'm fine now." Even his speech was much clearer now. Fang Mafei was overjoyed and said, that's great. I'll go inform Lao Mei now. This fellow has been torturing himself to death these few days." He then left hurriedly. Yunyang lay quietly with his eyes closed, but his heart was not at peace. This time, due to his sudden injury, he owed a lot of favors. Spring, summer, autumn, and winter, these four fellows must have taken out their best treasures. As the saying went, one could see the general trend from a small clue. The 500-year-old Lingji mushroom and imperial spirit liquid were already extremely unusual. The 500-year-old Lingji mushroom was still easy to come by, but the Lingji mushroom, even a 100-year-old one, would be considered a rare treasure, let alone a 500-year-old one. As for the imperial spirit liquid, it was an even better medicine. As for the medicinal pills that Dong Tianling had given earlier, these must have been given to these four people by the four noble families to protect their lives during critical moments. Chapter 125. Yunyang sucked in a breath and began to manipulate the power of the endless divine art in his body. Half a quarter of an hour later, when Lao Mei came over, he saw that Yunyang had already entered the state of inner reflection. Layers of mist slowly rose from his body. Lao Mei was an expert in cultivation. Knowing that he could not be disturbed, he heaved a sigh of relief and slowly retreated out of the door. Silently, he walked to the door and sat down. The four little fellows were also very tactful and did not try to take advantage of the situation. Instead, each of them chose a window and squatted there. The last one, with a swoosh, climbed onto the roof and slowly squatted there. His 8 little ears straightened up at the same time. His 8 little eyes were rolling around and he was extremely vigilant. The moon hung high in the sky. Yunyang woke up again and sat up. He tried to stretch out his legs to get off the bed, but he felt that his legs were weak and it was difficult to continue. After trying a few more times, he finally stood up with the support of the bed. After moving around for a while, he felt that his feet were firmly planted on the ground. He increased the amount of movement and the bones in his body made a series of kacha-kacha sounds, like beans being fried. Young master is finally fine. Fang Mafei and Lao Mei were full of smiles. You guys have worked hard this time. Yunyang smiled softly and said seriously. To be able to serve young master is a blessing that we can't even ask for in 8 lifetimes. Fang Mafei and Lao Mei said respectfully, a little hardship is nothing. Fang Mafei hesitated for a moment before he finally asked carefully, young master, this time, what exactly is going on? Yunyang sighed softly. It had been a narrow escape from death this time. To be more precise, it had been a narrow escape from death. The danger of this incident was even greater than what had happened at Tianshan Cliff. The moment the elder lifted his head, Yunyang's beer sensed that he had been locked onto. At that very moment, the wind that Yunyang had transformed into rose 500 feet into the air. Then, he saw the old man raise his hand, and an unprecedented attack filled with a destructive feeling suddenly surrounded him. If it wasn't for the fact that he saw the opportunity in time and pulled the distance between them a lot, even if he had 10 more lives, even if he transformed into clouds and wind, he would not be able to avoid the road to the underworld. Even Yunyang could not help but shudder at the thought of the terror that had gripped him in that instant. Too powerful. It was too terrifying. There was simply no room for resistance. Until now, Yunyang still did not understand how he, who had turned into the autumn wind and wandered in the sky, had been discovered. It was probably because his current cultivation level was not high enough, and he did not understand the realms of those high-level cultivators and the reactions they could make. In short, under that strike he had almost disintegrated on the spot. If it wasn't for the fact that he had just broken through and his mystique wind conjuration cultivation base had reached the 4th stage, if it wasn't for Emmy's timely support that allowed Yunyang to maintain the form of the wind, he would have really died. It would have been a death that would have destroyed his cultivation base, his soul, and his body. He would have been as dead as he could be. After the attack, Yunyang, who was severely injured, wanted to leave immediately and run far away. However, he knew that the elder would not let him go just like that, so he persevered, maintaining the form of the wind and continuing to wander in the air. Indeed, this terrifying elder had been testing him for an entire night. In the end, Yunyang's energy was completely depleted, and it was Emmy's support that he managed to hold on until he returned home. If there had been the slightest mistake in this process, it would have been difficult for him to escape the fate of disintegrating and losing his soul. Before this, it was not that Yunyang did not know about this elder in the residence of Crown Prince, but he had only thought of him as an old scholar and a strategist. At most, he had some life experience and wisdom. That was all. Looking at the age spots on his face and the fact that he could barely walk, Yunyang had a feeling that this old man did not have many years left to live. In the end, when he attacked, it was actually such an earth-shattering presence. When the elder finally gave up at dawn, retracting his aura and returning to the yard, Yunyang could already feel that he could not hold on any longer. Even then, the elder had actually said something to deceive Yunyang, something that was extremely bewitching. How distrustful was he, and how confident was he? Yunyang had a judgment about the elder. This elder was definitely not a 5th peak, 6th peak, or 7th peak practitioner. Even Marquis Yun and old Dugu, who had been waiting for the brothers in the small house, had not given him such a terrifying feeling. This person was definitely an existence that had surpassed 10th perfection. He was completely unprepared and completely unprepared. The attack, which caught Yunyang off guard, had almost killed him, his soul shattered, and he would never be able to recover. How could he deal with such a terrifying person? There was no way he could fight him now. Even if he had 1,000 tricks up his sleeves, it would be useless against such absolute power. Yunyang frowned deeply. There were 2 enemies in Tiantang City now that he could not deal with them with his current ability. One was Mi Kongchuan in the palace. The other was old He. How could he kill them? How many days have I been unconscious? Yunyang asked weakly. Including today, it has been 4 days and 4 nights. Fang Mafei's eyes were still filled with lingering fear. When he had seen Yunyang fall from the sky, he had been scared out of his wits. Has it been 4 days? Yunyang heaved a soft sigh of relief and said, "Did anything major happen in these 4 days and 4 nights? I haven't heard of anything major happening in the outside world. Maybe we didn't go out much." Lao Mei said, however, the 4 young masters of spring, summer, autumn, and winter would come a few times a day. They also brought a lot of spiritual medicine with them. Yunyang nodded. Even if they had ulterior motives for helping in times of crisis, they had to be remembered. Old Marshal Qiu Jianhan came again. Lao Mei grinned. But it's different this time. He came in a rage and was dumbfounded when he saw your condition. Then he left. Then he sent some medicine over. Yunyang perked up immediately. This old man came again? Old man, Fang Mafei and Lao Mei looked at each other. In this world, this man before them was probably the only one who dared to call old Marshal Qiu this way. Somehow, both of them would have criticized him if they had known that Yunyang was Supreme Cloud. Now, however, they could only criticize him silently. Now that Yunyang's tone was smooth and he had even begun to joke, his body should be fine. It was comforting to both of them that their hearts that had been hanging in suspense could finally be at ease. What they did not know was that Yunyang's injury this time was far more serious than they had imagined. It was easier said than done to fully recover. Another 2 days had passed, but Yunyang still felt weak all over. Although his condition continued to improve and the speed of improvement was enough to make those who knew about it widen their eyes in shock, how could Yunyang be satisfied? The news from the 9 Heavens dictum made Yunyang feel that the 4 Seasons Tower's actions were speeding up. The Crown Prince's residence has begun to tighten its defense. The strategists have begun to contact officials and generals everywhere. The frequency of their actions has increased by 3 times compared to last month. The 3rd Prince's residence has begun to contact officials as well. They're also trying to contact the Nine Heavens Dictums people. Although they haven't made contact yet, the omen isn't good. The same goes for the fourth prince's residence. The same goes for the fifth prince. The Grand Tutor has been ambiguous recently. It said that he had a dispute with General Lung Daoyin, but the exact reason is still unknown. Marshal Tai Zheng has been borrowing money from everywhere to prepare for his wedding. The censors and censors are still targeting the Board of War, impeaching all military matters that can be impeached. Old Marshal Chiu has rebutted them all. Chapter 126. It was a headache for Yun Yang, but he could only watch and passively receive the Nine Heavens Dictum's message. Severely injured, he could not even activate his mystical chi and could not issue any commands. Yun Yang estimated that he would need at least 3 more days to be able to use a small amount of mystical chi without leaving behind any repercussions. As for fully recovering his ability, it would take at least half a month. This was the power of a top-notch expert. He did not have to attack you directly, it was just the shockwave. Then, within the range of his spiritual realm, even if he did not notice you, you would still be severely injured. A fatal injury. Faced with such a situation, even Yun Yang, the soul of the Nine Supremes, could only sigh helplessly. Actually, Yun Yang did not think that this incident was his fault. The other party was simply too powerful. Even if he was not in his current identity, he would still take a look at the sudden movement. As long as he was still human, a martial artist, he would be attracted by the aura. What was more, he had come with a purpose. One cannot have any curiosity in the martial world. That's because any curiosity could cause even an experienced martial artist to be consigned to eternal damnation. Yun Yang reminded himself in his heart. However, what comforted him was that the spectral path of the soul and the abyss path of flesh had yet to appear. At least, the legendary air of resentment had yet to surge. Perhaps this meant that those people were still alive. Yun Yang was slightly relieved. Since he could not do anything, he would take a break for now. Recuperation and recovery were the priority. Perhaps I can only enjoy such leisure in this life when I'm severely injured. Yun Yang chuckled bitterly. If so, I shall enjoy this rare leisure time. Yun Yang had only laid down for a short while before he stood up and moved his limbs. He felt that he could move freely now. As long as he did not use mystical chi or the power of his soul, a simple movement would not be a problem. He was about to speak when he seemed to recall something and sat down immediately. He opened the message on the Nine Heavens Dictum and read the last message. When this subordinate was investigating, he found someone fishing at the 1,000-feet lake, but no fish took the bait for a few days. The angler seems to be an expert, but his subsequent movements are unknown. I wonder if this information is useful. Yun Yang was deep in thought as he read the message. The 1,000-feet lake. There are no fish for a few days straight and they're still holding on, an expert? Yun Yang's gaze flickered. Yun Yang then called Lao Mei to his side, ignoring the fact that he had to use his mystical chi. Placing his right hand on Lao Mei's shoulder, he channeled his cultivation and guided Lao Mei's mystical chi into Yun Yang's meridians. The old man fishing at the 100-feet lake, report to me in detail. In that instant he felt a sharp pain in his meridians. 4 hours later, completely detailed information came in. Yun Yang looked at it for a full 2 hours. The more he looked, the brighter his eyes became. It was to the extent that he was actually a little hesitant at the end. Something caught his attention. This person is always carrying a wine gourd on his back. Wine gourd? Yun Yang finally gritted his teeth and murmured, "Doesn't it matter who I die in? Cheers." The next morning. Lao Mei, look after the house. If anyone else comes, treat them well. If anyone else sends medicine, just politely decline them. Bring out my precious wine and... Yun Yang made arrangements and said, "Let's go, old Fang. Let's get a carriage and go fishing." Go fishing? Lao Mei and Fang Mafei were dumbfounded. They would never have imagined that their young master would have such a sudden idea. 4 high-level cultivators like us, why would we need to fish? We only needed to stretch our hands into the water and a large number of fish would be caught. Was there a need to go through so much trouble? If they had seen the Nine Heavens Dictum's news, they would probably be even more devastated. You don't care about so many national affairs and you go fishing just because you heard someone was fishing? Where were the 9 Supremes who protected the nation, the righteousness of Supreme Cloud? There was a faint smile on Yun Yang's face. It was precisely because of this that he wanted to go fishing. If that person was really an unparalleled expert, he must have his own reasons for waiting for 3 days. Would it not be more convenient to use mystical skills to catch fish? Besides, Yunyang thought of something else. Back then, Supreme Earth's biggest hobby was fishing. Even when he was fishing at the 1,000-Feet Lake, he was often the only one fishing on the surface of the lake. There were also times when he could not catch any fish. Yunyang only knew a little about fishing and did not have much interest in it. Sometimes he would even wonder, why are you sitting there if you can't catch any fish? Isn't the purpose of fishing to fish? Thinking of Supreme Earth, the corners of Yunyang's lips curled into a smile. To him, this injury might not be entirely a bad thing. At least I've met all of you again, my brothers. Let me see what kind of person that fishing expert is, and what his purpose is. A carriage rumbled as it moved forward. It headed towards Tiantang City, towards the 1,000-Feet Lake. It was said that the deepest part of the 1,000-Feet Lake was 1,000 feet deep. The water was crystal clear, and if it was a sunny day, one could even see dozens or even hundreds of caddies of fish swimming freely in the water. There was another saying about the 1,000-Feet Lake, perhaps it was a unique feature of the lake. The west and east shores of the lake were separated by 1,000 feet. The west shore was 1,000 feet of hell while the east shore was 1,000 feet of heaven. The east shore was filled with red flowers and green willows, birds sang and swallows danced, the fragrance of cosmetics wafting through half the city while the west shore was dark and overgrown with weeds. Such a situation was not entirely due to the geographical difference. The main reason was that there was a mass grave slightly further away from the west shore. Who would be willing to come to such a place? The south shore was connected to a main road while the north was connected to a field of rocks with half a cliff behind it. When Supreme Earth was free, he would often act as a fisherman on the north shore, holding a fishing rod in his hand. Sometimes he would sit there for 2 days. He was usually the only one fishing on the entire surface of the lake. That was because all the locals knew that the 100-Jiang Lake was too deep. Even if one was extremely lucky, one would only be able to catch some palm-sized fish at best. Those truly big fish would never be able to be caught. In that case, what was the meaning of the person fishing there? Yunyang did not think too much about it. If you're really interesting, my trip here wouldn't be in vain. However, if you're just here to kill time, it doesn't matter. I'm here to take a few days off. I'm not lying when I say that I'm here to fish and relax. Not long after, both Yunyang and Supreme Earth arrived at the north shore of the 1,000-Feet Lake. Just as Yunyang alighted from the carriage, he was stunned by what he saw. There was actually someone fishing on the north shore of the 1,000-Feet Lake, and he had occupied the spot where Supreme Earth usually fished. He was currently holding a fishing rod in his hand, fishing with full concentration. The person wore a wide straw cape and a straw hat that almost covered his entire body. He held a black fishing rod in his hand, standing as steady as a mountain. Yunyang was in a trance as if he was seeing Supreme Earth smiling at him. For a moment he almost thought that time had turned back. The attire of the person before him was exactly what Supreme Earth had worn when he was fishing in the past. How could this person be so coincidentally occupying this spot? The north shore was so wide, there was naturally more than one fishing spot. However, Yunyang asked Fang Mafei to send him to the centermost spot, which was also the concave fishing spot. Other people could only see someone fishing here, but they would never be able to see what the person looked like. At most, they could only see a shadow, that was all. The person from before was currently in this spot. However, this seat was definitely not spacious. There was only a big protruding rock, and that person was sitting steadily on it. With a glance, Yunyang felt that this fellow was surrounded by an aura that prevented strangers from getting close to him. Whether he was an expert or not was not a question. However, the meaning of "don't talk to me" was very clear from his body language. Yunyang understood immediately. If he were to initiate a conversation with such a fellow, there was a 99% chance that he would be rebuffed. However, was this the person? Beside this person, there was only a rock that had just emerged from the water about half a foot wide. At least, from Fang Mafei's point of view, it was impossible for anyone to sit there. "I'll sit here." Yunyang pointed with a smile, indicating where he could sit. Despite Fang Mafei's embarrassment, he could only think of a way to make a seat for himself even if there was none. "My apologies." Fang Mafei spoke to the person and flew up, carrying a large square rock from behind him and placing it into the water. Poof! The water splashed. As the boulder sank, the surrounding water bubbles rose one after another, and a large circle of ripples spread out, affecting a wide range. The person mumbled as if he was cursing. Yunyang was still standing quietly with his arms behind his back. Hearing the person's mumble, he chuckled inwardly. "Didn't you not want anyone to talk to you? Alright, I'll let you talk to me then. Continue." Fang Mafei scratched his head, continuing to move the rocks. Poof, poof, poof. More than a dozen rocks were tossed in consecutively, and Fang Mafei actually managed to form a sturdy platform in the water. Naturally, the water splashed and the surface of the water was murky. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.